Hello everyone, and welcome back. Out here on the loneliest roads in the world, truckers carry more than cargo. We carry nights we don't talk about, moments that stayed with us long after the engine cooled, moments that changed the way we look at the dark. If you're here, it means you're ready to ride with us again. Down the highways where radios go silent, headlights catch things that shouldn't be there, and every mile has its own secret. Before we roll into tonight's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another true trucker nightmare. And when it's over, drop a comment and tell me what you think really happened out there. All right, let's shift into the dark. I'm Ray, a long-haul cargo driver out of Phoenix, and the load that shifted on Route 19 almost sent me over a mountain and into something worse. I've run freight most of my adult life. Dry vans, reefers, flatbeds, you name it. After a while, every highway turns into just another line on a map, and every load becomes another paycheck. You stop thinking about what's back there as long as the seals match the paperwork and the numbers look right at the scale. That night on Route 19, that's when I stopped taking any of that for granted. It started like any other late pickup. I was at a small industrial depot on the edge of town, one of those outfits that loads you with mixed industrial supplies. Pallets, drums, crates, whatever they need moved last minute, dock-packed, sealed before I even backed under it. All I had was a manifest on a clipboard and a guy in a reflective vest telling me, "You're good to go, driver." The trailer felt heavy but not insane. Right around 38,000 in the box, plus my rig. I checked the seal number, matched it to the paperwork, did my walk-around, kicked the tires like we all pretend means something, and pulled out onto the highway. My route took me north, up into the mountains on Route 19, aiming to be over the summit before dawn and down the other side by breakfast. The first couple of hours were fine. Open desert, clear night, engine humming that steady note you can almost fall asleep to if you're not careful. The kind of drive where your world shrinks down to the dash lights, the white lines, and the glow of your gauges. Then the terrain started to change. The road began to climb, long rolling grades turning into steeper pulls where you feel the weight of the load tugging you backward. It was on one of those early grades that I felt the first shift. I was in a low gear, pulling steady, when something slammed inside the trailer. Not the normal little shudder you get when a pallet inches a bit. This was a hard, sudden crash, like a whole stack of weight had jumped from one side of the trailer to the other in a single move. The whole truck leaned for a second. I had to correct the steering to keep it centered. I swore under my breath and kept going. Bad loading, I figured. Maybe they strapped it lazy. Happens all the time. You curse the warehouse guys and you get on with your life. But a few miles later, it happened again. Same thing. I'd settle into a curve, feel the weight where it should be, and then, a heartbeat later, it would slam late, like something inside had waited on purpose until the last second to throw itself against the wall. The timing was wrong. It didn't follow the physics I knew by feel. It lagged behind, then hit. The road narrowed as I climbed. Guardrails appeared, the kind that stand between you and a long drop full of pine trees and rocks. The higher I went, the more that trailer seemed to react. On right-hand curves, I'd feel a delayed pull left, like some giant animal back that was bracing itself and then launching into the turn. About halfway up, there's this little dirt pull-off I like to use when I need a minute. Just a flat patch carved into the mountain with a view of nothing but black trees and empty air. I eased the truck over, let the engine idle, and sat there with my hands still tight on the wheel for a second, listening. The night was dead quiet. No other trucks, no cars, just the ticking sound of hot metal cooling. The trailer stood behind me, white sides glowing faintly under the stars, perfectly still. I hopped out with my flashlight. Habit. I checked the straps under the frame, the landing gear, the tandems. I walked all the way around, shining the light up and down the sidewalls. Nothing unusual. No bulging, no busted panels, no leaks. The tires were fine. The seal on the back doors was untouched. Same number on the manifest. I stood there with my hand on the cold metal of the door for a second, thinking about cutting that seal and taking a look inside. But you don't do that unless you have a damn good reason. Shippers don't like it, receivers don't like it, and your company definitely doesn't like it. It was just a load of industrial supplies. Boxes, drums, crates. "Get a grip, Ray," I muttered. "It's just bad loading." I got back in, eased off the brake, and pulled out onto the grade again. Right away, the sound changed. Instead of random thumps, I started hearing a new noise under the whine of the engine. Something like a heavy object dragging across the floor. Not sliding with the motion of the truck, dragging out of sync with it. I turn right, feel the lean, and a second later, a slow, grinding scrape to the left, like something resisting the movement before finally giving in. The steering started to feel wrong too. On left-hand curves, I'd feel this extra tug toward the guardrail, like the trailer was trying to pivot around me. I kept both hands locked on the wheel, muscles tight, shoulders aching. The road clung to the side of the mountain, no shoulder, just rail and emptiness. The weather turned with the elevation. 1 minute I was under a clear sky, the next I was pushing into a soup of fog that rolled over the road in thick, wet sheets. My high beams bounced back at me, useless. I cut them, slowed down, let the low beams carve a narrow tunnel through the gray. That's when the CB came alive. "Keep it centered up there, driver." The voice was faint, half smothered in static. "Grade's taken more than it's given." I reached for the mic. "Say again?" "You got a copy on Ray up on 19. Nothing. Just a hiss and crackle that sounded like someone breathing through a broken radio. I switched channels, listened. Every now and then I caught half a phrase. Someone warning about the grade, about accidents up here, about loads that didn't ride right. But it was never clear, never full. I told myself it was skip, atmospheric junk bouncing around. Still, my grip on the wheel got tighter. My palms were slick. The road wound steeper, sharper. I watched the yellow curve signs. 35 miles per hour, then 30, then 25. My speed dropped. My world shrank. The fog smothered everything beyond the guardrail. Felt like driving the edge of nothing. Ahead, I knew there was a hairpin turn. I'd run this route enough times. It was one of those turns that always demanded respect. Tight, blind, with a bad drop-off and a history of crosses and flowers on the side of the road. I eased down to a crawl as the warning sign came into view. First gear, engine brake humming. I could feel the weight behind me pushing down the hill like a fist on my back, even though I was still climbing. I adjusted my line, turned the wheel, and started into the curve. For a second, everything was fine. The truck began to lean, tires humming on the pavement. Then the trailer moved. It wasn't a normal sway. It was a violent, intentional lunge. I felt it slam to the outside of the curve, hard enough to jerk the cab sideways. My steering wheel went light in my hands, like the front tires barely had contact. The guardrail was suddenly much closer in my side window than it should have been. The whole rig was tipping, pulled toward the drop. I swore out loud, planted my foot gently but firmly on the throttle to pull us through and out instead of braking and making it worse. Every nerve in my body screamed. The trailer yanked again, a heartbeat behind my correction, like it was fighting me, trying to drag me through the rail and into the dark. I could hear the load moving now. Not crates, not drums. A single, long, grinding scrape along the floor, sweeping from one side of the trailer to the other in a big, lazy arc. "Come on! Come on! Come on!" I whispered, knuckles white on the wheel. For a moment, I felt the sickening shift of weight that means you might be going over. That slow, tipping feeling like a coin deciding which side to land on. The guardrail flashed in my headlights, close enough that I could see the bolts holding it together. The fog below the drop glowed faintly, swallowing the light. Then, somehow, the trailer settled. The tires bit back into the asphalt. The cab straightened. We came out of the curve and onto a straighter stretch. I didn't breathe for a few seconds, just drove, hands fixed, eyes locked, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Nice save, driver." The voice on the CB was a whisper now, almost swallowed by static. I didn't answer. I didn't touch the mic. I just kept climbing. By the time I saw the glow of the Summit Way station through the fog, my shoulders felt like someone had hammered nails into them. That station isn't always open late, but that night every light was on. 2 patrol cars sat out front, red and blue bars dark but present. Silhouettes moved inside. As I rolled over the scales, the speaker crackled. "Bring it on up and park, driver. Leave it running." That tone. I've heard bored officers, annoyed officers, joking officers. This was something else. Tight. Alert. I eased off the scale and parked where they pointed, set the brake, and climbed down. The air up there was colder, sharper. The fog had thinned around the station lights, a little island of visibility in a sea of gray. A state trooper walked up with a clipboard and a serious look. "You Ray? Coming out of Phoenix?" "Yeah," I said. "Mixed industrial headed north." "Something wrong?" He looked over my shoulder at the trailer. "Your paperwork says 38,000 even in the box." "That's what they told me." He jerked his thumb toward the office. "Scales reading a lot more than that." "How much more?" I asked. "Enough I'm surprised you made that grade without tipping it into the valley," he said. That cold feeling in my gut got worse. They had me bring the manifest inside. I watched them run the numbers 3 times. Tractor weight was normal. Fuel levels matched. It was the trailer that didn't make sense. According to the scale, I'd been hauling tens of thousands of pounds more than I should have been. "Maybe your scale's off?" I offered, even though I'd felt the truth of that weight in my bones all night. The trooper gave me a look that said he didn't appreciate me insulting his gear. "We verified it this afternoon. It's not the scale." We went back and forth a bit. They asked about my route, my speed, any stops, any signs of tampering. I told them about the pull-off, about checking the tires and the seal. I didn't tell them about the dragging noise or the way the truck had tried to pull itself off the mountain. Some things you don't say if you want to keep your CDL and your sanity. In the end, there was only one thing to do. "We're popping that seal," the trooper said. "If something's loaded wrong or there's extra weight, we need to see it." I followed them back out to the trailer. The fog pressed just outside the halo of the station lights, thick and waiting. Another trooper stood by with a flashlight and a camera. The one with the bolt cutters double-checked the numbers on the seal against my manifest, then snapped it with a sharp metallic crack that made me flinch. The doors groaned when they opened them. Inside, my breath caught. The trailer was mostly empty. A couple of pallets were shoved hard against one wall, broken and splintered, boxes torn open and crushed. A couple of metal drums lay on their sides, dented in, like something heavy had rolled over them. Packing material was scattered everywhere, shredded cardboard, busted plastic. But it wasn't the mess that got me. It was the floor. The plywood at the back of the trailer was gouged deep in long, curved arcs, over and over, like something massive and heavy had been dragged in sweeping circles, learning how to move, testing its grip. The grooves ran from side to side, then forward toward the doors, then back again, almost like footprints if you squinted. Not human, not animal, just movement. The troopers shone their lights along the gouges. Nobody said anything for a long time. "Where's the rest of your freight?" one of them finally asked. I don't know," I said. My voice sounded small in that empty space. "I was sealed at the dock. It was heavy when I left." He pointed at the tracks on the floor. "Whatever was in here shifted a lot. You're lucky you didn't roll that thing off the mountain." I didn't feel lucky. I felt watched. Standing there in the open doors, I had this crazy, crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, like something was still in there, just out of the reach of the light, like it had spent the whole night getting used to the idea of moving, of throwing its weight around in the dark. And we'd interrupted the lesson. They brought in a supervisor, took pictures, argued about whether it was theft, misload, or something else. I answered questions, signed statements, waited around while my company got chewed out over the phone. Eventually, they let me drop the trailer there and bobtail to a motel for the night. I didn't sleep. Weeks later, I heard talk on the radio about a couple of wrecks on that same grade. Trucks with normal loads that somehow tipped on dry pavement, no weather to blame. Guys mentioning weird scale readings, trailers that felt alive, rumors about a bad batch of trailers with flexing frames. I don't know what I believe. I just know what I felt. I've never taken Route 19 at night again. I route around it, even if it costs me time and fuel. If I have to go over that mountain, I do it in daylight with a load I've watched them pack from start to finish. And every now and then, When I hear something shift just a little too late in a turn, I think about those gouges in the floor. About something huge, invisible, dragging itself in circles in the back of my trailer, trying to understand how weight and momentum work. Trying to learn how to move in the dark. I'm Carla, a reefer driver with 15 winters under my belt, and I still hear what was locked in freezer 47 whenever I pass a cold storage yard at night. Reefers are their own kind of hell. I've hauled dry vans, tankers, even a flatbed or two when freight was slow, but I always end up back with the humming white box behind me, babysitting temperature readouts at 3 in the morning. Most of the time, the worst you deal with is a unit that won't hold temp and a receiver who screams about thawed chicken. You curse, you reset, you move on. That night wasn't like that. Dispatch called me just after 11, when I was half dozing in the bunk at the truck stop outside town. Quick midnight pickup, the guy said. Meat plant off County 12. Frozen pork, standard run, good miles. Can you roll? I'd run that plant before. Big concrete block of a building out in the middle of nowhere. Lights that made the whole place glow sickly white against the fields. Drivers joked about it being cold to the bone, and not just because of the chill in the dock area. Still, it paid on time. I threw on my boots, warmed up the truck, and headed out. The road to the plant was 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through black fields. No houses, no traffic, just my headlights and the faint orange dome of the city far behind me. When I turned into the plant drive, the sodium yard lights buzzed overhead, painting everything in that pale, washed-out color that makes people look like corpses. I checked in at the guard shack. The guy on duty slid the clipboard toward me without much talk, eyes down like he was doing time, not working a job. Trailer 47, he said. Reefer. They'll tell you the dock. He didn't look at my face. That registered, but I was tired and in work mode, so I just nodded and drove on. The yard was a maze of white boxes, reefers lined up like tombstones. I found Unit 47 backed against Dock 6, nose out, hookup hose dangling. Even from a distance, something felt off about it. The doors were already frosted white around the edges, thick enough that it looked like it had been sitting at deep freeze for a long time. Usually, they stage an empty trailer at temp, hook you, and then load it. This one felt older, used, like it had history. I backed under, felt the satisfying clunk as Kingpin met fifth wheel, air lines hissing into place. When I walked back with my flashlight to crank up the landing gear, I ran my hand over the metal of the doors, and the chill bit through my glove. We're talking colder than a normal -20 set point. There were little crystals of frost radiating out from the door seams, forming spidery patterns over the paint. Inside the dock, the workers were quiet. Normally, you hear the usual banter. Guys yelling at each other, a radio playing somewhere, a forklift beeping. That night, it was just the low whine of equipment and the slap of rubber boots on wet concrete. When I handed my paperwork to the dock lead, he took it without meeting my eyes. Frozen pork, full load, he said. We'll get you out as quick as we can. Appreciate it, I said. You guys keep it this cold all the time? He hesitated just a fraction, then shrugged. It's a cold storage, lady. I stepped back out to the yard while they loaded. Watching forklifts go in and out of the dock opening, I noticed something. No warm vapor was spilling out from the trailer when the doors opened. Usually you get that big breath of cold air pushing out into the slightly warmer dock. Here it was just cold against cold, like opening a freezer inside a bigger freezer. They were done in about 40 minutes. Seal went on, number noted, reefer already running. The yard log had it marked as Freezer 47 in somebody's messy handwriting, like it was a nickname. I signed my copy, climbed into the cab, and pulled out around 12:15. It was a clear night when I left the plant. Stars overhead, sharp and bright in the cold air. I set the reefer at the requested temp, checked my mirrors, and settled in for the run. Highway was quiet, just a handful of trucks spaced out over miles. The unit hummed its usual steady drone behind me as I rolled onto the interstate. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the reefer trying to pull lower than my set point. At first, it was just a little overcool, 1 or 2 degrees under. Happens sometimes. Machines aren't perfect. I bumped the set point up a notch. The unit answered with a heavy surge, like it was punching the compressor harder, and the readout dipped lower instead of higher. "Come on," I muttered, tapping the control panel like that would help. "We're not hauling ice cream." I adjusted again. The unit fought me. Every time I tried to ease it up, it shoved the temp down. 15 winters, I know what a faulty sensor looks like. This didn't feel like that. It felt like the trailer wanted to be colder, like the frozen space behind me was insisting on it. By 2 a.m., I'd settled into that mid-run zone where your brain starts drifting. The highway was empty, just the rhythmic flash of reflector posts on the shoulder and the faint burn of rest area signs now and then. My dashboard glowed a soft green. The reefer readout sat stubbornly below my set point, tiny red arrows still trying to drive it down. That's when I heard the first thud. It came from behind me, deep and dull, like someone punching the inside of the trailer wall with a gloved fist. Not the random rattle of boxes settling. This was a single, solid impact that carried up the frame and into the cab. I stiffened, glanced in my mirrors. Dark trailer, marker lights winking. Nothing strange. I told myself a pallet had finally shifted. Bad stacking, maybe. Rough patch of road. A few miles later, it came again. Another thud. Same spot. Same weight behind it. I turned down the heater fan to listen better. My breath fogged faintly in the cab, even though the vents were blowing warm air. The glass at the edges of the windshield had tiny crystals forming, little branches of frost creeping inward, which was not normal with the heat on full. "Reefer's acting weird," I said. "Unit keeps trying to run below set point. I'm hearing some noises in the trailer. I want authorization to break the seal and check the load." "Negative," the dispatcher said immediately, like he'd been waiting for it. I could almost see him in his cubicle, script in hand. "Breaking the seal voids the load. Receiver will reject. We eat the cost, you don't get paid. Is the temp in spec?" "It's low," I said. "Too low. Below minimum or just below your set point?" I checked the numbers. Still inside the acceptable range, technically. Just colder than it should have been trying to go. "In range," I admitted. "Then keep rolling," he said. "Her temp is your job. Noise is just product. Deliver it, we'll deal with any issues then." "What if the load's damaged?" I pushed. "What if? If you break that seal without a DOT order or a cop on scene, it's on you, Carla. Company policy. You know that." The line clicked. He'd hung up. The pounding got louder, closer together. Thud, thud, thud. Like fists hitting metal in a panic. Underneath it, a new sound emerged. Something soft and muffled, stretched out between the impacts. It was almost like voices pressed through a wall of insulation. Not clear enough to understand, but enough that my brain tried to turn it into words. I drove faster than I should have on that empty, dark stretch, eyes flicking between mirrors and road, knuckles aching on the wheel. The highway climbed into low hills, trees leaning in on either side. No towns, no exits, just little green mile markers ticking past. Somewhere out there, the night changed. Thud, a little faster this time. I swallowed. "It's just the load," I said out loud, like I could talk myself into believing it. "They probably stacked it too tight in the back. But I've heard products settle for years. Boxes topple, cases rub, drums roll. This wasn't that. There was a rhythm to it, a beat, like someone knocking, like someone trying to get attention without the strength to go all out." Around 2:30, I pulled off at a tiny truck stop I knew, one of those old-school places with 6 spots, a flickering sign, and a worn little storefront. I figured I'd get coffee, check on the unit, maybe talk myself out of calling dispatch and making a fuss. When I eased into the lot and set my brake, the night clerk stepped out onto the stoop. He was an older guy with a belly and a gray beard, wearing a faded hoodie under his vest. He watched me back in, eyes narrowed, cigarette ember glowing near his face. I rolled the window down. "You open?" He nodded slowly. "Always. Park over at the far end, though." I frowned. "I ain't blocking your pumps. I'll just grab coffee and go." He shook his head, glanced past me toward my trailer, then back. "Not near the building. Take that thing over there. He pointed to the far edge of the lot, near the dark tree line. I looked in the mirror at the reefer. What? You got something against frozen pork? He took a drag of his cigarette, exhaled through his nose. Got something against that trailer. Last guy with that number didn't finish his run. Cold pinched the back of my neck. What do you mean, last guy? He shook his head again, like he'd already said too much. Didn't finish his run is all. Park her over there or hit the next stop. Up to you. I don't scare easy, but something in his tone made my skin crawl. I parked where he told me. When I stepped down, I noticed the air felt colder around the trailer, the kind of cold that bites your joints. The reefer hummed away, sounding wrong, a little off-pitch like a voice gone hoarse. Inside, the coffee machine sputtered out a burnt-smelling brew. The clerk didn't say much else. When I pressed him, he just shrugged. Lot of reefers come through, he said. Some you remember. Thud. We both heard it. Even inside, with the door shut, the sound carried across the lot. He put my change down on the counter and refused to meet my eyes. You have a good night, driver. I walked back out into the cold. The pounding picked up after that. Once I was back on the highway, it stopped pretending to be random. It settled into a sick, steady rhythm. Thud, pause, thud, pause. Every few beats, there'd be a scrape mixed in, like something dragging across metal between hits. It was coming from high on the doors, not low where pallets would be. My breath fogged heavy in the cab now, despite the heater cranked. Frost crawled farther in on the inside of the windshield, forming long streaks. In my peripheral vision, those streaks looked like fingers pulled through the ice. I dialed dispatch on the hands-free. The reefer unit alarm shrieked suddenly, a piercing beep that made me flinch in my seat. The digital readout flashed red. The compressor whine cut off, replaced by a rattling cough, then silence. I watched the numbers start to fall, slow at first, then faster, like watching a heart monitor flatline. The cold in the cab deepened, as if someone had opened a door to the Arctic behind me. My fingers went numb on the wheel. Behind the cab, the pounding turned frantic. No more rhythm now, just a constant hammering assault on the inside of the doors, fists, or what my brain insisted were fists. Slamming the metal so hard I could hear rivets vibrating. Between the blows, those muffled cries rose, overlaps of sound that didn't make sense until a few split the noise and hit clear. A word here, a sob there, something like please drowned in frost. I snapped. I threw on my hazards, eased the truck onto the narrow shoulder, and set the brake. The road was empty. The only light came from my flashers and the dim glow of the dash. For a moment I just sat there, chest heaving, staring at my own fogged breath. My hands shook as I reached behind the seat and dragged out the bolt cutters I kept for emergencies. I told myself this was a reefer emergency. Temp failure. Possible spoilage. I needed to check the load. That's how I justified what I already knew I was going to do. The air hit me like a slap when I stepped down. Couldn't have been more than 15 degrees out there. Maybe colder, wind cutting across the asphalt. I walked back along the trailer, boots crunching on gravel and old snow. Every slam from inside rattled the doors. The metal looked like it was flexing in tiny, shuddering pulses. Up close, the frost on the doors was thicker. The patterns weren't random anymore. Long, curved streaks radiated from the center, trailing off into shapes that looked too much like hands smeared in ice. I swallowed hard, put the bolt cutter jaws around the seal, and hesitated. The pounding stopped. Dead silence. The sudden lack of noise pressed on my ears, almost louder than the chaos had been. I cut the seal. Metal clinked to the pavement. I grabbed the handle, braced myself, and yanked the right door open. A blast of air hit me so hard I staggered back. Not just cold, freezer cold. Walk-in, deep storage cold, the kind that seizes your lungs on the first inhale and makes your eyes water. My breath crystallized in front of me in a white cloud. The smell came with it. It wasn't meat. Not exactly. There was a sour, sweet rot under the freezer burn. A human kind of stench I recognized from one bad wreck years earlier when I'd stopped to help before the EMTs got there. Old sweat, fear, something else I couldn't name. I pulled my sleeve over my mouth and shined my flashlight inside. The trailer was empty. No pallets, no boxes, no plastic-wrapped pork. Just bare metal walls and a floor coated in frost so thick it looked like packed snow. My boots slipped when I took a cautious step inside. On the walls, the frost wasn't smooth. It stood out in ridges and lumps, forming shapes. They were subtle at first. A curve here, a cluster there. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw them. Silhouettes pressed into the ice like something had leaned against the walls from the inside. Curled shapes, knees tucked to chests, heads bowed, arms wrapped around invisible ribs. Dozens of them, faint but there, overlapping. In the frost near the doors, 5 long streaks slashed downward, the marks of hands dragged in desperation, over and over in the same path until they'd worn grooves in ice. I stumbled back out, heart hammering against my ribs. The air outside felt warm by comparison. My flashlight beam shook across the asphalt. Behind me, the reefer unit clicked once, twice, like something trying to cough back to life. Then nothing. I called dispatch again with numb fingers, told them the unit had failed and the trailer was empty. There was a long pause on the other end. "Empty?" he repeated. "Empty," I said. "No product, no pallets. You need to get someone out here. I'm not moving this thing." They sent a tow and a supervisor. By the time anyone showed up, the frost shapes had softened, like breath on a mirror fading away. There were still strange patterns on the walls, but they didn't look as sharp as human. Nobody mentioned the smell. The company and the plant argued about who messed up the load. Insurance got involved. I had to give statements to people in dress shirts who smelled like coffee and toner, not diesel. Nobody asked about the pounding or the voices. When I tried to bring it up, faces went blank and pens stopped moving. A week later, I rolled back through that same plant. Freezer 47 was gone from the yard log. New numbers, new units. When I asked a yard guy about it, he shrugged. "Retired," he said. "Scrap, I think." He wouldn't look me in the eye when he said it. It bothered me enough that, on a day off, I did some digging at an old library downtown. Local papers, back issues, the kind people forget once the next accident happens. That's where I found the clipping. "Human trafficking ring busted after reefer tragedy," the headline read. The article talked about a smuggling attempt 5 winters earlier. A group of undocumented migrants locked into a reefer trailer by traffickers who promised them a short ride across the border to jobs and safety. The unit malfunctioned or was set wrong, depending on who you believed. The driver panicked halfway through the route, dropped the trailer in an abandoned lot, and disappeared. By the time law enforcement found it, everyone inside was dead. The photo showed a familiar-looking white box being towed away. The caption mentioned the highway, the same route I'd been on. Officially, the victims were mourned, the case tried, the unit decommissioned. But freight companies cut corners. Equipment gets shuffled, repainted, renumbered. A 7 can look a lot like a 1 with a line through it. Some nights, when I'm running past a cold storage yard, I catch the edge of a reefer in my mirror with just a little too much frost around the doors. I turn up the radio, focus on the road, and tell myself it's just the weather. Then, every now and then, when the night is quiet and the miles are long, I think I hear it again. That faint, rhythmic pounding behind me. Soft voices bleeding through steel and ice. Something in the dark, still trying to get delivered. I'm Jen, a dedicated night hauler for high-value cargo, and the extra pallet on my trailer nearly got me killed before I could deliver it, or whoever put it there. Nights are cleaner when you're moving expensive stuff. That's what I always like to tell myself. No sticky soda loads, no leaking drums, no busted produce. Just tight-sealed cartons of electronics, sealed totes of pharmaceuticals, luxury goods in perfect cubes. My job was simple. Hook the load, guard it like it was my own, and run the miles between one secure dock and another. I'd been on the high-value lane for 3 years without a serious incident. I knew my shippers by face and my dispatchers by tone. Most of the time, the scariest thing I dealt with was some idiot tailgating a bit too close when they saw the high-value sticker on my paperwork. The night with the extra pallet started rushed. I was late getting to the city warehouse. Construction on the Beltway, Idiot in a minivan who didn't understand zipper merges. Same story as always. By the time I backed into the dock, the yard guy was already waving at his watch. "You're Jen?" he called, his voice echoing in the dim concrete bay. "Yeah," I said, setting the brake. "Load for Dallas, high value." He nodded toward the open dock door. "We're live loading you. 8 pallets, pre-picked. We'll have you out fast." Live load on high value always makes me twitchy. I prefer preloaded, sealed boxes I don't have to watch crawling down the dock. But I was behind, and the money on this lane was good. I chocked my wheels, killed the engine, and watched from the platform as they started bringing freight over. Pallet after pallet rolled into my trailer, tight, square stacks of branded boxes. Laptops, tablets, smartwatches, all wrapped in plastic, banded, barcode. I counted out loud in my head as each one went in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They were just about done. Forklifts beeping in that high-pitched way that always grinds my nerves. When another pallet came out of the shadows, I almost missed it. No big logos on the boxes, just plain brown cartons with small labels. Shrink-wrapped tight. The forklift driver slid it right into the center of the trailer, between the second and third row. It sat there like a square dot in the middle of a question mark. "Thought you said 8. I called to the floor supervisor. He barely glanced up from his tablet. "Sometimes the manifest lags," he said. "System showed 7 earlier, then they added 1 more. It'll be fine. We'll fix it on the other end." I walked over to the edge of the dock, propped a boot up, and counted again as the forklift backed out. 1 against the nose, 2 and 3 side by side, 4 and 5 behind them, 6 and 7, then 8 and that extra 9 near the doors. I stepped down off the dock and climbed up into the trailer, running my hand lightly along the plastic wrap of the center pallet. The boxes underneath felt solid. The labels were generic, just item codes and weights. No product names. "What's on this one?" I asked. The floor supervisor shrugged. "Mixed. It's all going to the same place. Relax, driver. You're burning my clock." I didn't like it, but the dock lights were glaring, the forklifts were still moving, and there was a line of trucks building up in the yard. I told myself they wouldn't be this casual with something that needed special handling. High value was supposed to be tight, locked down, clean. They finished, closed my doors, slapped on a bright red numbered seal. I put my own padlock through the hasp as well, like I always do. 2 layers between my freight and anyone curious enough to check. Out in the yard, the air was cool and sticky, city pollution hanging low. I eased the tractor out onto the street, then into the web of midnight traffic, aiming for the interstate. The GPS estimate said I'd reach the receiver a couple of hours before sunrise. Perfect timing. For a while, everything felt normal. The truck pulled like it should with 30-something thousand in the box. No rattles, no clanking. High-value loads are usually quiet, tight packing and good palletizing. But this felt too quiet. No flex at all. On rough patches of highway, I should have heard at least a little shifting in the stacks. I kept thinking about that extra pallet. 9 instead of 8. I glanced down at the printed manifest on the passenger seat. 8 pallets. 8 line items. 8 barcodes. No 9th. About an hour into the run, my phone buzzed in its dash mount. Blocked number. I hesitated, then hit accept and put it on speaker. "Jen," a calm male voice said. Not a question. A statement. "Who's this?" I asked. "You've got an overage on your trailer tonight," he said. "Don't worry about it. Just stay on your route. Do not stop until you reach the correction point." "Correction point?" I repeated. The phrase made my skin crawl. "The old service plaza at mile 142, he said. "Use the back lot, near the dumpsters." You know it. I did know it. Everybody knew it. It had been shut down for months. Rumored to be reopening. Never did. Dark and half abandoned. Sitting like a dead tooth off the highway. "You want me to stop at a closed plaza with a high-value sealed load?" I said. "That's not happening." He chuckled, soft and patient. "You don't have much choice. We need to adjust your freight before you hit the receiver. They're not cleared for that pallet. My grip tightened on the wheel. Who is we? Dispatch, he said smoothly. We're just using a different line tonight. Bull, I snapped. My dispatch doesn't use blocked numbers. There was a pause. Under the engine noise, I heard faint clicking, like a keyboard being tapped. Then he spoke again, a touch less friendly. You're in Unit 4083, he said. Company tractor, white. You're hauling trailer 962. Seals ending in 59. You just passed exit 73, you're in the center lane, and your right turn signal bulb is out. Do you want me to keep going, Jen? A cold chill ran through me. I checked the mirror. The right blinker on the trailer was flashing weak, almost dead. I hadn't even noticed. You've been live-loaded from the city warehouse on Fulton, he continued. You've got high-value cargo in the box. You know we're watching you, so don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mile 142. Back lot. No stops. He hung up. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own breathing and the rush of air outside. I stabbed the button for my real dispatcher. He answered on the second ring. Night dispatch, this is Rob. Did you just route me to an old plaza at 142? I asked, voice tighter than I meant. No, he said. Why would I do that? You're a straight shot to Dallas. What's wrong? I told him about the call. The voice, the details, the instructions. Absolutely not us, he said. I could hear typing in the background. Your load notes say no unscheduled stops, but nothing about a correction. And we would never send you to an unsecured location. Hang tight. I'm flagging the load. Hanging tight on an open interstate with a ghost caller tracking my rig does not feel great, Rob. I get it, he said. Stay public. Stay lit up. I'll see if I can raise highway patrol for your corridor. Have them keep an eye out. And Jen? Yeah. Do not go to that plaza. That much I didn't need to be told. I ran another 30 miles with my shoulders up around my ears. Every set of headlights in my mirror, every car that paced me a little too long, I eyed like it might be connected. The trailer rode solid and absolutely silent, like whatever was back there didn't need to shift with the road. When the next big, busy truck stop appeared, lit up like daytime with floodlights and neon, I took the exit almost on instinct. Bright, crowded, noisy. That seemed a better bet than smooth sailing in the dark. I swung wide around the fuel islands and found a spot near the front, right under a pair of tall lights. Trucks were lined up tight, reefers humming, air brakes sighing. I set my brake and just sat for a minute, letting my hands stop shaking. That's when I heard it. Faint, soft, a scraping sound from behind the cab, low and slow, like a heavy wooden pallet being dragged a few inches across a metal floor. I turned off the blower fan, held my breath. Scrape, pause, scrape. I climbed down and did a slow walk around, boots crunching on stray gravel and old cigarette butts. The night air tasted like diesel and fried food. In the glow of the lot lights, my trailer looked ordinary. But when I got near the rear, I noticed something that made my stomach dip. The suspension on the right side sat a little lower than the left. Not enough to scream broken, but enough that the floor line was not quite level, like someone had stacked something much heavier onto one pallet than the rest. A guy walking his dog along the row slowed as he passed behind my trailer. He squinted at the back end, then at the pavement. That's some weird loading, he said. Excuse me? I asked. Look, he said, pointing. Your right side's sitting heavier, and that's with you dead straight. I'd check your distribution if I were you. Working on it, I muttered. He moved on, dog sniffing at shadows. When I looked at my padlock, my mouth went dry. I put it on myself back at the warehouse. Smooth, new, clean chrome. Now, fine marks scored the metal around the shackle hole. Tiny scratches, clustered and fresh, like someone had jammed something into it from the inside. The hasp itself had faint scrapes too, angled outward. Something or someone had tried to open the doors. My phone buzzed again. Same blocked number. I answered without saying anything. That was a mistake, the man said. The calm tone was gone. He sounded irritated. I told you not to stop. You're not dispatch, I said. Stop pretending. You think they can protect you? He snapped. Those clowns can't even keep your route secure. You open that trailer before we tell you to, and you'll regret it. Mile 142. Last chance. I looked across the lot. A state trooper cruiser sat parked by the entrance, engine idling, headlights off. The silhouette of the driver was visible behind the glass, head turned in my direction. I'm not going anywhere alone with this load, I said. You're already alone, the man said. You just don't know it yet. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling like the ground had tilted a few degrees. I had an extra pallet with no paperwork, a stranger who knew too much about me, and now a trooper watching my rig like he'd been waiting for me to stop. For a moment, the idea crossed my mind. Get back in the truck, do what the caller said, avoid all this. No cops, no questions, no risk of losing my job over unauthorized stops or broken seals. Then the trailer creaked. A low, heavy groan from the frame. The whole box rocked once, just a hair, enough that the metal at the corners ticked. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them and walked across the lot toward the trooper. He rolled his window down as I approached. Evening, ma'am, he said. Everything all right with your rig? Not really, I said. I've got a high-value sealed load, an extra pallet that doesn't exist on my manifest, and someone calling me on a blocked number telling me to deliver it to a closed plaza off the interstate. They know my truck, my route, and exactly where I am. His expression changed from polite to sharp in an instant. Say that again, he said quietly. I did. All of it. The extra pallet, the call, the fake dispatch, the sagging suspension, the scratched lock. He was on the radio before I finished. His voice stayed cool, but the words he used, possible interference with interstate cargo, suspicious overage, requesting units, told me I wasn't overreacting. Stay right here, he said when he was done. Do not move your truck. Do not let anyone near that trailer. More cruisers showed up fast. Lights patterned the lot in red and blue. They blocked the exits, cleared a radius around my rig, and then the questions started. Name, company, route, pickup point, everything. When they asked about the seal, I hesitated. If we cut it, that's my job in danger, I said. Company policy. Ma'am, the first trooper said. If someone's using your trailer to move something off the record, this is bigger than a policy violation. We'll document the break. You're covered. In the end, I nodded and stepped back. They photographed the seal, my padlock, the doors. Then one of them produced bolt cutters and snapped my lock like it was made of tinfoil. The seal went next with a clean, sharp crack. The doors swung open under harsh flashlight beams. 8 pallets gleamed in the lights, all neat and ordinary. Labeled product, branded wrap, nothing out of place. And in the center, where I'd watched that extra pallet roll in, was something else. It was shrink-wrapped in black plastic from top to bottom. No labels, no markings, just layer after layer of dark film. The pallet underneath looked older, slats rough and splintered. The plastic itself had a dull sheen, scuffed in places like it had been dragged instead of lifted. The shallow impressions were what got me. On the sides of the black-wrapped cube, the plastic bulged and dented in shapes that didn't match boxes. 2 roundish spots at the top front, about where someone's knees might hit if they were curled up inside. Lower down, on one side, 5 elongated ovals pressed out in a rough fan. Fingers, or what my brain insisted were fingers. Everyone back, one of the troopers said sharply. He dropped the door, leaving it half open, and started barking into his radio faster. The next few hours blurred. More units arrived. Federal plates, unmarked dark SUVs, guys in windbreakers with grim faces. Someone mentioned bomb squad. Someone else said the word hazmat, and I caught a whiff of something sharp and chemical before they pulled a perimeter around the trailer and pushed me just outside it. They moved me to the edge of the lot, sat me on the curb with a blanket around my shoulders like I was in shock. Maybe I was. I watched people in heavy suits move around my rig, the black plastic-wrapped pallet still sitting there like a black hole in the middle of my cargo. My phone buzzed once. Blocked number. One ring, then gone. I didn't answer. Nobody told me much. They took my statement 3 different times, in 3 slightly different ways. A man with tired eyes and a badge clipped to his belt asked the same questions as the troopers, only slower, like he was listening for lies I didn't have time to invent. What did they say on the phone? He asked. That they needed to correct the overage at mile 142. I said. That my receiver wasn't cleared. That I would regret it if I opened the trailer early. Did they identify themselves? He asked. Dispatch, I said. But they knew things dispatch wouldn't know, or wouldn't say like that. He nodded like that matched something he already believed. By the time they released me, the sky in the east was turning gray. My trailer was gone, hitched to some other tractor and escorted away. They put me in a taxi back to my yard like I was a temp who'd just finished a double shift. Dispatch tried to smooth it over later. Told me I'd done the right thing, that the company backed me. They paid me for the run, plus a disturbance bonus. Like that made up for the way my hands shook when I thought about the impressions in that plastic. I never found out officially what was on that extra pallet. Unofficially, word trickled down like it always does. Another driver heard from a cousin who worked courthouse security that the feds had been looking for a container of evidence that vanished from an evidence locker months earlier. Something tied to a high-profile case, organized crime, missing people, dirty cops, depending on who was telling it. Files, hard drives, maybe worse. Something someone wanted off the books badly enough to tuck it into the middle of my legitimate cargo and hope I'd keep my head down and follow instructions. Some nights, when I'm rolling with another sealed load behind me, my mind goes back to that black-wrapped pallet, to the way the floor seemed to sag under it, to the way the plastic pressed outward like someone or something inside had tried to make itself known and been smoothed back flat. I still haul high value. I still trust my paperwork. But I count every pallet now, every time, and I don't let anyone wave me off with, "We'll fix it on the other end," because I've learned there's freight that exists on the manifest, and freight that exists only in the spaces between what people are willing to write down. And once you've hauled secrets that needed that much darkness around them, you never really feel like you're just moving boxes again. I'm Mason, a night driver who never feared deadheading an empty trailer, until the one I pulled from that wrecked yard didn't stay empty for long. Most guys hate deadheads. No money in pulling air. Me, I never minded. No weight, no stress, better fuel mileage. An empty box feels like freedom compared to 45,000 in the hole. That was true right up until the night my empty came from a salvage yard. It started with a favor. Dispatch called me a little after 11. I was halfway through a burger at a truck stop, watching some muted game on the TV. "You still up, Mason?" my dispatcher asked. "Yeah," I said. "What's up?" "We bought an old trailer off an insurance auction," he said. "Salvage yard over on County 7. Need it repositioned to our main yard tonight so the shop can look at it in the morning. Easy deadhead. You'll get an extra 100 on your check." "Empty?" I asked. "Empty," he said. "Just a box. Go grab it, drag it an hour up the road, clock out." An extra 100 to pull air for an hour sounded fine. I wiped the grease off my hands, paid my bill, and headed out. The salvage yard sat way off the main drag, down a long, rutted road past a line of half-abandoned warehouses. No other traffic. The only light out there came from a tall mercury vapor pole at the entrance and the weak yellow spill from a little shack by the gate. I pulled up, rolled my window down, and handed the guard my paperwork. He was an older guy, heavy coat, thermos on the desk, little space heater humming at his feet. "Company pickup?" he asked, squinting at the form. "Yeah," I said. "Empty trailer. You bought it at auction." He grunted, signed something, then reached for a key hanging on a pegboard. The tag read just a number, no company name. "Back row, far right," he said. "You'll see it. Last one against the fence." "That it?" I asked. He hesitated just a second. "Watch your footing," he added. "Lots uneven." I'd been in plenty of salvage yards. I didn't think much of it. Inside the fence, the place looked like a graveyard for trucks. Burned-out cabs with their roofs peeled back, twisted frames half buried in weeds, stacks of bent rims. Old company logos ghosted on the sides of wrecked boxes, paint faded and peeling. Everything smelled like old oil, damp rust, and something sharp underneath, char, maybe from fires long out. I crept along the gravel lanes in low gear, headlights swinging across broken glass and puddles. The back row was exactly where he said. A line of orphan trailers backed tight to a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Most of them were obvious write-offs. One had its roof caved in. Another's rear doors were gone entirely. The interior blackened as if something had burned from the inside out. My trailer was the last one in the row. White box. No markings. Just a unit number stenciled near the front in black. What grabbed my eye first were the scrape marks along the side. Fresh compared to the rust on everything else. Long, jagged streaks where something had torn against the metal guardrail, maybe, or another truck. I backed under it slow. The landing gear groaned as I lifted it off its feet. When the fifth wheel locked with a heavy clank, I felt it through the seat. Empty trailers usually feel light when you tug test. This one settled onto the tractor with more weight than I expected for a deadhead. Not loaded heavy, but not air, either. Like someone had tucked a few pallets against one corner and then lied about it. And it pulled slightly to the right, like whatever was in there wasn't centered. Probably just a twisted frame, I told myself. Salvage special. I hooked the lines, did a quick walk around. Tires all holding, lights working, no obvious holes. When I swung the rear doors open to be sure, my flashlight cut through darkness and picked out nothing. Empty. No pallets. No freight. The floor was bare except for a few scorched straps hanging loose from the wall tracks and a single beaten-up sneaker lying on its side in the back corner. The wood floor was stained dark near the nose, like something had leaked and burned in, but it was bone dry now. I hated that shoe. Something about it felt wrong, like it was waiting for the other one to show up. I told myself not to be stupid, closed the doors and latched them. On the way out, I signed the yard's release form. The guard handed me my copy and gave the trailer a long look. "You taking that one far?" he asked. "Just up to our main yard," I said. "Hour or so." He nodded, but his eyes never left the box. "It's seen some things," he muttered. "Drive careful." Out on the main road, I picked up speed. The sky was cloudy, no stars, no moon, just a low lid over everything. My headlights tunneled through the dark. The trailer rode heavier than an empty should, always wanting to drift a little toward the right shoulder. I kept a bit more pressure on the wheel than usual. In my mirrors, the side of the box was a dull gray shape with the top vent covers open. Now and then, as I passed under a streetlight, I thought I saw a shadow move behind the vent holes. A shift of darkness, like someone walking past a narrow window. I told myself it was the way the light hit the inside of the empty trailer. Reflections. Nothing more. About 20 minutes north, the two-lane cut through a stretch where everybody in the area knew a bad crash had happened a few weeks earlier. New black skid marks scarred the asphalt. The guardrail was freshly replaced in one section. On the shoulder, a little memorial had sprung up. Flowers, candles, wooden crosses with names written in marker. A teddy bear pressed against the post. I'd seen it on the news. Multi-vehicle pileup in the fog. Tanker, 2 cars, and a dry van. Several dead. They'd had to shut the highway down half a day. My high beams washed over the memorial as I approached. For just a second, my eyes went to it instead of the road. That's when the trailer lurched. The whole rig jerked violently toward the right, like something inside had thrown its full weight against that side. My steering wheel yanked in my hands. I swore and corrected, muscles straining, tires hissing as they bit the edge of the lane. The right side mirror showed the trailer swinging closer to the shoulder than it had any business being. "Easy, easy," I hissed, fighting it back centered. As I drove past the memorial, the pull eased. The trailer settled back into a straight line like nothing had happened. For a few seconds, my heart was beating so hard I could hear it. I checked my mirrors again. Trailer looked normal. Light steady. No sway. Then I heard the banging. It started as a dull thump behind my head, somewhere around the bulkhead. A single hit, like someone punching the inside of the front wall. Then another, and another, light at first spaced out, too rhythmic to be road noise. I turned off the radio, listening. Thump, scrape, thump. Between the hits, there was this high, grating sound like fingernails or something similar scratching down aluminum. Not long drags, short, testing strokes. I told myself it was just loose straps inside. Those burned, half-melted things I'd seen hanging from the rails. They could be swinging, tapping the walls. But straps don't make sounds that deliberate. The road narrowed through a wooded stretch, no shoulder, trees close on both sides. My headlights picked up the white flash of mile markers. The banging migrated, or at least that's how it felt. 1 minute it was right behind my seat. The next, it was back near the axles, like whatever was making it had moved down the length of the trailer. I clenched my jaw and kept driving. The first truck stop I saw was a tiny, old one. Just 4 parking spots, 2 pumps, and a squat building with a flickering sign. I swung in there, more for my nerves than anything. I wanted light, people, something normal. As I pulled into a spot, every pole light in the lot blinked off at once. My dash glowed, the pump numbers lit up, but the yard went black. Then one of the lights popped back on, flickered, died again. Another buzzed as it tried to catch. It was like the place was fighting to stay lit and losing. I sat there a moment, engine idling, listening to it chug and to the faint, irregular taps from the trailer behind me. A guy in a grease-stained jacket came out of the building, cigarette glowing at the corner of his mouth. He shaded his eyes with his hand, looking over the lot lit only by my headlights. "Damn lights," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then he noticed the trailer. I saw his face change in the glow, something like recognition, then discomfort. "You fueling or just parking?" he called over. "Just parking a minute," I said. "You losing power?" He flicked his cigarette, nodded toward my rig. "They were fine until you pulled in." I didn't like that. "You know this trailer?" I asked. He walked closer, squinting at the side, tracing one of the long scrape marks with his gaze. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, I think I do. Wasn't that long ago, either. Winter pileup, out on 19. Tanker, a couple four-wheelers, and a dry box just like that. I remember all the scrape jobs they did hauling what was left out of there." He eyed the unit number. "Pretty sure that's the one they parked over at the rec yard for a while. Guess somebody thought they could squeeze a few more miles out of it." "Great," I muttered. "You got a real talent for making a guy feel good about his night." He shrugged. "Wasn't the trailer's fault. But I wouldn't sleep in it." The lights finally stabilized, buzzing overhead. I went inside, bought a coffee I didn't need, then came back out and stared at the rear doors. Curiosity got the better of me. I unlatched one, cracked it a foot, and let the flashlight beam slide in. The air that rolled out didn't smell rotten. Smelled thick, metallic, like hot brakes and old blood once it's dried on asphalt. The floor near the front still had those dark stains, but now, in the dust and grime closer to me, I saw shapes I hadn't noticed before. Smudges on the walls that, when the light hit just right, looked like faces pressing out. Noses and brows and cheeks suggested by patterns in the dust. On the floor, streaks radiated toward the doors, some of them with what looked very much like finger marks at the end. Hand-width streaks like people sliding, being dragged, reaching. I shut the door quick and jammed the latch into place. I'm Rick, a certified hazmat tanker driver, and the night a simple detour rerouted my load turned my rig into a rolling nightmare. I've been pulling tanks long enough to know most people are scared of the wrong stuff. They see hazmat on the placard and picture Hollywood explosions, mushroom clouds, fireballs. Truth is, it's usually the invisible things that get you. Fumes, vapors, slow leaks you don't smell until you're already breathing wrong. That's why I liked my rule simple. Follow the approved route, avoid back roads, no cute shortcuts. You treat the load with respect and you get home. This particular run started at a refinery I knew too well. Place was a small city of pipes and steam when the sun was up and a burning steel forest at night. I checked in at the gate a little before midnight. Sodium lights lit everything the color of old bone. The flare stacks painted the low clouds orange. The product that night was an industrial solvent. Non-explosive, supposedly. The kind used to strip God knows what off parts before some other process started. I'd hauled variations of it a dozen times. The manifest listed it under a long chemical name I couldn't pronounce. What bothered me wasn't the print. It was the handwriting. At the bottom of the paperwork, under the typed hazard descriptions, someone had scribbled in shaky letters, "Fume caution, use extreme ventilation." It wasn't part of the standard warnings. I'd seen the sheet often enough to know. I held it up to the loading clerk at the bay. "What's this about fumes?" I asked. He barely looked at it. "Legal being dramatic," he said. "Same stuff as last time. You're good. Keep your windows up. Vents on recirc. You know the drill." I watched the guys on the gantry connect the loading arm to the top of my tanker. Pumps thudded. The metal under my boots vibrated as they filled the barrel. Off to the side, a couple of workers in respirators checked gauges. Masks fogged with their own breath. They looked like something out of a different kind of movie. When the loading was done, I climbed up and checked the domes myself. Seals looked good. Hatches locked. No visible mist or vapor. The night air was cool and smelled like every refinery night. Burned gas, oil, a hint of something sharp. Inside the office, the dispatcher on duty signed off on my route sheet. "Straight shot, Rick," he said. "Interstate all the way until you cut south at mile 210. No stops except your mandated breaks. And don't take them anywhere near towns. You know the protocol." "I know it," I said. "No detours, no scenic routes." He smirked. "It's midnight. Scenic is closed anyway." I rolled out of the plant with the lights of the stacks fading in my mirror, my tanker humming behind me, full and heavy. The placards on the sides and back shouted the hazmat code in big black numbers. I always feel more exposed with those on. It's like driving with a sign saying, "Hit me and everyone suffers." The first hour was uneventful. I settled into the rhythm. Engine at a comfortable rumble, trailer steady, gauges in the green. Radio low, windows up, vents closed to outside air. I could still catch faint whiffs of refinery stink on my clothes, but nothing out of the ordinary. Traffic was light. Couple of other trucks, some late commuters, the occasional set of headlights sliding by. The sky was a deep, clean black with no moon, just a handful of stars fighting with light pollution. Then the GPS chimed. The screen flashed, the little route line ahead of me turning from blue to gray. "Accident reported ahead," it said in that bland synthetic voice. "Rerouting you to save 12 minutes. The new route line swung me off the interstate in about 15 miles, down onto an older two-lane that paralleled the main highway through a string of small towns I didn't recognize. I frowned at the map. That road was narrower, twistier. It cut closer to some residential streets. Exactly the kind of path we were supposed to avoid with this kind of load. I reached for my phone on its dash mount. A new text sat at the top of the screen from dispatch. "Accident ahead MM 134 to 136. Detour approved. Follow GPS reroute, acknowledge." I tapped to call them instead. Dispatch answered on the second ring. "Night desk. It's Rick," I said. "GPS is writing a detour for me onto some two-lane. You guys really want me off the interstate with this tank?" "Stand by," the voice said. Muffled clicking followed. "Yeah, we pushed a detour notice," he said after a moment. "Pile up there, hazmat team on scene, states closing the lanes. You'll be fine on the old highway. It's officially sanctioned." "That route goes near houses," I said. "DOT signed off," he replied, sounding bored. "We forwarded you the approval. You'll see less traffic, actually. Safer." It didn't sit right in my gut, but I'd heard of reroutes before. Storms, wrecks, construction. Hazmat didn't mean invincible. It meant controlled. "All right," I said finally. "But if something goes sideways, I'm writing your name in my report." He chuckled. "I'll frame it." 15 miles later, I took the exit like the GPS told me to. The ramp dropped me down onto a two-lane with cracked asphalt and faded center lines. The interstate lights fell away behind me, replaced by occasional yellow glow from tired street lamps in small clusters. The first few miles of that old highway were quiet enough. Houses spaced every quarter mile, most dark, a porch light here and there, rusted mailboxes, sagging fences, a couple of shuttered gas stations. The tanker rolled smooth. No strange noises, no sway. I told myself I was overreacting. Then I smelled it, faint at first, a metallic tang that didn't match the usual diesel and asphalt. It was like the inside of a paint can, the air in a shop where someone's been cleaning parts with solvent all day. Not strong, but persistent. I checked the HVAC settings. Recirculate on. Windows sealed. I shouldn't have been smelling anything from the outside or from the barrel. I cracked the driver's side window for a second and sniffed. The night air outside smelled mostly like damp grass and cold dirt. When I closed it again, the metallic scent crept back in. It was subtler than a leak should have been, like something that had filtered through layers. My tongue started to feel coated, like I'd licked a battery. I pulled into a wide gravel pull-off near a closed diner, put my flashers on, and climbed down. The air outside felt cooler and cleaner. The smell was almost gone the second I stepped out. I walked the length of the tanker with my flashlight, beam crawling over valves, hose connections, the undercarriage. I checked the manway covers, the outlet ports, the relief valves. No visible drip, no mist, no sheen on the metal. The barrel was warm under my hand, but not hot. I knelt near the main outlet and sniffed. Nothing but the ghost of whatever had been on this road 100,000 tires ago. When I climbed back into the cab and closed the door, the metallic odor slid back into my throat like it had been waiting. Not stronger, just there. Insistent. CO2 monitors clean, I told myself, glancing at the little device clipped to the dash. Numbers were normal. No alarms. You're fine. I pulled back onto the road. The fog rolled in slowly at first, like breath on a cold mirror. It began as wisps along the ditch, little tendrils of white that curled around fence posts and telephone poles. Then it thickened, creeping up over the asphalt until my low beams were cutting through a gray wall 10, maybe 15 feet ahead. Streetlights turned into soft halos. Reflective signs smeared into glowing blobs before I was on top of them. The lane markers, already faded, disappeared altogether. I slowed down, hazard lights on, every nerve alert. Fog was bad with any load, but with a hazardous tank behind me, I felt every second of it in my spine. That's when I started seeing them. The first figure appeared on my right, just beyond the edge of my beams. A shape, roughly human height, wearing what looked like a hard hat and a vest. He stood perfectly still beside the road, hands at his sides, face turned toward the truck. I thought it was a road worker at first, some poor guy stuck on night duty. I lifted my foot, ready to brake if he stepped closer. He didn't move. His vest stripes barely glowed. The fog wrapped around him, hiding his features. As I passed, I turned my head to look directly through the side window. He wasn't there. Just empty shoulder, grass, and fog. Okay, I muttered. Refinery fumes and long nights. That's all this is. A mile later, there was another one. This one on the left side, near a collapsed fence and an overgrown ditch. Same vague silhouette, work clothes, maybe safety gear, arms hanging. Watching, I fought the urge to stare. Eyes forward, hands steady. When I checked the mirror a second after passing, the shoulder behind me was empty again. No figure, no footprints in the damp dirt. My eyes started to sting. Not crying, irritation. Gritty, like I'd been swimming in chlorinated water. My head felt tight, like a band around my temples. I checked the CO2 monitor again. Normal. The radio clicked on without me touching it. No music station this time. No DJ. A monotone voice read out something about hazardous release. The words slightly garbled by static. Sections of Highway 47 and the surrounding access roads are now closed, the voice said. Residents are being asked to shelter in place as emergency crews respond to a chemical spill involving tanker designation. The name of the chemical matched what was on my manifest. Fumes are reported to cause disorientation and hallucinations. The voice went on. Multiple first responders have collapsed. Drivers are being warned to avoid the area. My hand shot out and slapped the power off. The radio went silent. The CO2 monitor beeped once like it was annoyed with me, then settled down. I glanced at the GPS. My little icon scooted along a representation of the road I was on. According to the map, I was still miles from any intersection with Highway 47. According to the broadcast, though, that area was already full of my product, spilled and killing people. My mouth tasted like copper. The figures by the roadside kept appearing. Sometimes alone, sometimes in twos or threes. Some wore what looked like turnout gear, the silhouettes of helmets and bulky jackets. Others looked like regular people in jeans and jackets. All of them stood perfectly still. No waving, no motion, no interest in flagging me down. Just watching. Every time I tried to watch one in my mirrors after I passed, the fog behind me showed only the red pulse of my taillights and empty shoulder. The tanker began to pull in ways I didn't like. Normally, you can feel the liquid inside respond to turns and stops. A soft, lagging weight, a sway that you're trained to anticipate. This was different. The slosh was too strong on shallow curves and not strong enough on sharper ones. Sometimes I'd feel a surge right as the road straightened, like the whole contents had slumped in the wrong direction and needed to correct. The steering wheel tugged. There were moments when it felt like I was turning into a curve before I even saw it. My hands moved by something other than the lines on the road. I took another look at the GPS. The blue line ahead now showed bends that the road in front of me didn't seem to match. According to the screen, I should have been climbing a long, gentle rise. In reality, my headlights revealed a nearly flat stretch with just the slightest dip. The odometer showed miles ticking by, but the town names on the map stayed the same. A text buzzed onto my phone. Fog expected. Continue detour. Do not stop. Vehicles responding ahead. It said. The sender ID was Dispatch. My gut rolled. I hit call again. Dispatch picked up after a long ring this time. I recognized the same voice as before. Night desk. It's Rick again, I said. Where exactly is this accident you keep detouring me around? Still up there, he said. You're making good time. Just keep following the GPS, don't stop. You'll clear the zone before you know it. My gaze flicked to the fog beyond the windshield. You sure I haven't already reached it? According to your unit ping, you're not even close, he said. Fingers clicked on his end. You okay, Rick? Your biometric flag just went up. Heart rate a little high. I hadn't signed up for any biometrics. My truck didn't have that installed. I'm done with this detour, I said. I'm finding a way back to the interstate. That's not approved, he replied, steel edging into his tone. You need to stay on the designated route, then send a cop to arrest me. I snapped and hung up. The next intersection that offered a turn wide enough for a tanker, I took it. The GPS protested, recalculating in a frantic loop, trying to send me back to the same old highway. I ignored it, navigating by a sense of direction I'd built over years of zigzagging through states. The fog got thicker for a minute, like something angry I was leaving. My headlights bounced off a solid wall of white. The road under my tires narrowed. The edge lines vanished completely. I gripped the wheel, eyes burning, tongue heavy in my mouth. For a second, I had the sickening sensation that the tanker behind me wasn't following the tractor, that it was swinging off at an angle trying to drag me down some invisible ramp. I kept my speed low, 10 miles an hour, then 8, hazard flashers pulsing in the mist. Then, gradually, the air started to thin. White milk turned to gray wisps. I began to see the faint hints of lane markings again. A streetlight appeared ahead, sharp instead of smeared. I rolled under it like a submarine surfacing. A minute later, the green glow of the interstate signs rose up ahead. I took the ramp with almost painful relief, the curve familiar, the merge lane long and straight. As soon as I settled onto the main highway, an odd silence dropped over the cab. The radio stayed dead. The GPS eased back into normal, the route line straight, the little truck icon where it should be. The CO2 monitor gave a single friendly chirp and then sat quietly. My eyes stopped burning. My tongue lost its metallic edge. Behind me, the tanker rode like it always did, heavy, liquid, predictable. I finished the run on the interstate, following the original route sheet step by step. The receiver signed for the load without incident. No leaks, no pressure issues, no complaints about arrival time. If I hadn't had sweat dried into my shirt and a headache pounding behind my eyes, it could have been any other night. Back at the refinery a couple days later, I went to the dispatch office and dropped my report on the desk. I'd written it all down. The detour, the smells, the fog, the figures, the weird broadcast, the whole ugly thing. The day dispatcher, a different guy, read through it, frowning deeper with each page. "We never authorized a detour that night," he said. "You texted me," I replied. "Said DOT approved it. Told me to follow GPS." He shook his head. "We log every route change. There's nothing here." He turned his monitor toward me, showing a screen with a simple line. "Tracker shows you stayed on the interstate the whole time. No deviation recorded." "That's impossible," I said. "I was on that back road for at least an hour." He scrolled. "Unit ping stayed tied to the main route. No dropouts, no reroutes. You may be dreaming while you drove." "Rick," I didn't answer. There's no point arguing with a computer record. It always wins. He handed my report back. "You want to file this as an incident, that's your right. But just know it's going to raise eyebrows. You've got a clean record. I'd hate to see someone start talking about fitness for duty because you saw ghosts in the fog or whatever." I left without filing it formally. Years later, I was at home between runs, flipping channels in a motel room that smelled like bleach and stale carpet. A local news segment caught my eye. Grainy footage of wreckage on an old two-lane highway, hazmat crews moving through thick white fog, their suits silhouetted in flashing lights. A tanker lay on its side in the ditch, its barrel torn open like a split can. Placards on the crumpled metal showed the same hazmat code as my solvent load from that night. The reporter's voice shook as she said the words. Officials confirm multiple fatalities, including first responders who were overcome by fumes. The accident occurred along the decommissioned Highway 47 corridor, where traffic had been rerouted in error. They cut to a still photo of the tanker upright at a previous point in its life. Different company logo, different paint job. The date in the corner of the live footage played over and over in my head. Month, day, year. They matched the timestamp burned into my memory from that night. The one I'd checked on the dash while listening to a future emergency broadcast about a spill that hadn't happened yet. Except apparently it had. Just not to me. I shut the TV off and sat there in the half-dark, listening to the hum of the motel fridge and the buzz of the neon sign outside. In my mind, I saw that old two-lane again, covered in fog, lined with silent figures in vests and helmets that disappeared when I passed. I still haul hazmat. That's what I'm trained for. But I don't trust detours anymore, no matter who approves them. If a GPS tries to take me down some forgotten road in the middle of the night, I stay on the main line or I park until daylight. Because there are routes out there that don't just take you through space. They drag you past something else. Past the echo of wrecks that already happened, or haven't yet. Past accidents waiting for the right truck, the right driver, the right night. And I am certain of one thing, whatever was in that fog wanted my rig to be part of that story, not just a guy years later watching it on the news. I'm Noah, a night runner who hauls electronics coast to coast, and the static that bled out of one midnight load still follows me on every dark stretch of highway. I live in the cab more than I live anywhere else. My job is simple on paper. Pick up brand new toys in boxes, TVs, sound systems, gaming rigs, from the coast and drag them inland so somebody else can stack them on store shelves. I know the ports, the warehouses, the routes between like the back of my hand. And I know what a normal night sounds like. Engines, tires, a bit of classic rock low on the radio. That's it. That night started at the port, just after sundown. Sodium lights turned the whole place that weird yellow-white that makes people look sick. Cranes swung containers off ships. Forklifts screamed past with pallets wrapped in glossy plastic. My trailer assignment had a big red flag on it in the system. High value, handle with care, No overnight stops, standard for the expensive stuff. I backed into the designated dock, felt the bump, and set the brake. As soon as I killed the engine, the warehouse door rolled up with the sound of a giant zipper. Workers were already lined up with pallet jacks and forklifts, the boxes on them shining with brand logos and 4K and Ultra slapped across the fronts. Long rows of televisions, stacked soundbars, gaming consoles, networking gear. All that money in cardboard. "Yo, Noah," one of the techs called. I recognized him. Skinny guy with a beard and safety glasses pushed up on his head. "Got a fun one for you. This batch is going to make some rich kids' Christmas." He grinned and slapped one of the pallets as it rolled past him. The shrink wrap crinkled. I watched them load, counting like I always do. 12 pallets, nose to tail, weight distribution good. They strapped a couple of the stacks that were top-heavy, scanned each barcode as it went past the dock door. Everything looked tight and clean the way the electronics always did. No busted cartons, no mystery boxes, no nonsense. When they were closing up, the same tech stepped over to the side of my open trailer, leaned one arm on the frame, and smirked. "Careful out there tonight," he said. "Always am," I replied, checking the manifest against the load sheet. He nodded toward the pallets. "Word is some of this stuff's built out of reclaimed guts from that big data center that burned down upstate. Recycling for the digital age, right? If they start talking to you in the dark, don't listen too closely." It was a dumb joke, the kind warehouse guys make to keep from going crazy with how repetitive everything is. I rolled my eyes, signed his handheld, and watched them seal the trailer. When the doors clanged shut, it was just another box full of expensive glass and circuits. I pulled out of the port with the ocean fog chasing me inland, that salty chill that clings to everything. Once I merged onto the interstate, the lights of the city dropped away behind me, replaced by long stretches of black road and the occasional cluster of highway lamps at interchanges. For the first hour, it was just me, the hum of the engine, and the quiet murmur of late-night radio. Talk show host rambling about politics, a caller from somewhere I'd never been. The usual. Then the radio started to slip. First, it was just a little crackle under the voice. I twisted the dial, thinking I was losing the station, but the signal bars on the screen stayed full. The host kept talking, but now there were other sounds under him. Half-formed words in another language, bits of a song that didn't match the station, a burst of what sounded like a siren wailing far away. I frowned and adjusted the antenna settings. The noise faded, but it didn't go away. Instead, it settled into the background like something breathing through the wires. About then, my CB crackled on its own. I hadn't touched the mic. I kept it on mostly to monitor traffic and listen for wrecks, but it was quiet that time of night. The speaker hissed, then popped, then let out a burst of static that had a rhythm to it. Inhale, exhale, inhale. I reached over and turned the volume down. "Not tonight," I muttered. A couple of miles later, the interference came back stronger. The radio dropped the talk show mid-sentence and snapped onto something else. A newsreader's voice, flat and fast, rattling off headlines in what sounded like German. For maybe 10 seconds, it was crystal clear. Then it bled into some garbled English I couldn't quite catch. Then a siren again, this time close enough that I instinctively checked my mirrors for flashing lights. The interstate behind me was empty. I hit the seek button. The display showed the same station frequency I'd been on before, like nothing had changed. Probably the tower, I told myself. Crosstalk or something. But the hair on my arms stood up when I said it. About an hour and a half into the run, the trailer started making noise. Electronics loads are usually dead quiet. Solid stacks of cardboard don't talk much. But from somewhere behind me, just on the other side of the cab, I heard a thin, high-pitched whine. It rose slowly, then dropped, like something powering on and off. Under that, soft clicks. Rapid, staccato, like 100 tiny switches being flicked in sequence. My dash lights flickered in time with the sounds. Brightness up, brightness down. The digital gauges jittered. The GPS screen dimmed for a second, then flared bright white before settling back to normal. The engine itself felt fine. RPM steady, temperature in the green. It was everything electronic around me that seemed to be having a fit. I tapped the brake pedal, watching the reflection of my lights in a sign. They worked fine. Truck was moving straight, no vibrations out of the ordinary. But the noises behind me grew more restless. The whine came in layers now, different tones stacking together like an electronic choir warming up. The GPS was the next thing to get weird. I glanced down to check my ETA and almost drove off the road. The map didn't show a highway cutting through rolling farmland anymore. The little truck icon, the one that marked my position, was gliding over a perfect grid of city streets. Street names I didn't recognize lined up in neat rows. There were no interstates, no rivers, nothing I knew. Just a dense grid like some downtown core. Then, for a blink, the blue of the grid shifted to a darker shade, and the labels changed. I saw the outline of runways, taxiways, a cluster of rectangles labeled like hangars. Then it all snapped back to my route like nothing happened. Just a black line across green terrain again. Little truck icon back where it belonged. Okay, I said out loud. That's not funny. Fog began creeping back in as I entered a more remote stretch. The kind of low, ground-hugging mist that thickened in the hollows and cleared on the hills. The radio kept cycling through nonsense whenever I passed under huge, sagging power lines. At one crossing, as metal towers loomed overhead, the static turned into a chorus of voices. Some were shouting in languages I couldn't pick out. One was reading off coordinates in a dead monotone. Another screamed a word, Mayday, over and over until it broke. My CB chimed in with a burst of squealing that felt like it stabbed straight into my skull. I slapped it off entirely. The silence hit hard. No motor rumble, no tire noise. Just the faint rush of distant highway traffic and the hum of the rest area's lights. And under that, a low, steady sound coming from the trailer. It was a hum, pitched right at the edge of hearing. Not engine, not wind. It felt like what you get in a server room, a constant underlying vibration from dozens of machines running at once. My fillings tingled. The hair on my arms stood straight up. I climbed down, the gravel crunching under my boots louder than it had any right to be. The air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. When I walked past the rear doors, my skin prickled, like I'd stepped under a live wire. I stopped, turned, and touched one of the metal handles. It wasn't hot or anything, but there was a sensation, like pressing your fingers against a TV screen with static charge. A faint, buzzing pressure pushing back. I stood there with my hand on the door and listened. At first, all I heard was the hum. Then, faint and irregular, came a tapping. Not loud. More like what your fingers sound like when you tap them on a laptop keyboard. Short bursts, a pause, then another burst. Patterns. I leaned in closer, pressing my ear near the metal. The cold seeped through my jacket. Between the taps, I heard something else. A whisper, too muffled to make out at first, just the cadence of speech without the clarity. I held my breath, focusing. It grew a hair sharper. Words began to thread through, fragmented sentences, pieces of thoughts, and then I heard something that froze me in place. My own name. Noah, the voice whispered, not in someone else's accent, not distorted. In my tone, like listening to a recording of myself talking in another room. My throat went dry. The voice inside the trailer whispered again, this time louder. Bits of things I'd thought earlier in the night. Not tonight. Probably the tower. That's not funny. My own voice replayed in the wrong place. I pulled my hand away like I'd been burned and took a step back. The humming didn't change. The air still felt thick around the box, like it was holding something in. I went into the restroom building, splashed some water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror for a while. My eyes looked tired but sane. I didn't feel sick, just wired. On the way back to the truck, I noticed the other rig in the lot had its curtains open now. The driver, an older guy with a gray beard and a ball cap, watched me walk by. "You on a phone?" he called. "No," I said, confused. He nodded toward my trailer. "Been hearing chatter. Thought you were talking out there." I didn't answer that, just climbed back into the cab and fired up the engine. The interference got worse the closer I got to the substation. I decided to stop at the next rest area. Not a truck stop, just one of those concrete and vending machine deals, but I needed to put my feet on the ground and get my head straight. The lot was mostly empty when I pulled in. One other rig, curtains drawn, and a couple of cars parked near the restroom building. The overhead lights buzzed but held steady. I swung my trailer into a slot, set the brake, and shut down the engine. There's a whole region on that route known for one thing: a massive power failure a few years back when a critical substation caught fire. Millions of people in the dark, grid knocked sideways, backup systems failing in weird ways. They rebuilt it bigger and stronger, but that reputation stuck. People told stories, how their electronics went crazy during the outage, how some devices never worked the same again. The towers started appearing on the horizon like huge skeletal giants. Red lights blinked on top of distant structures. As I rolled toward them, everything in my cab went insane at once. The dashboard lights flared to full brightness, washing the gauges in harsh white. Then they died to black, needles slamming to zero. A second later, they blinked back on, all the needles pegged past their max before settling back to normal. The GPS screen whited out. For a heartbeat, faint lines and numbers appeared, data readouts I'd never seen on it before. Then it snapped back to my route, but the little truck icon jumped ahead 50 miles, then back, then sideways over what looked like open ocean. The radio, which I had almost all the way down, roared to life. Static at first, then a single voice breaking through. Spoke in a language I didn't know, smooth and urgent. It sounded like a distress call. Then, slowly, the words shifted into English. "Help," it said. "Help us. We can't get out. It's still burning." The voice was mine. Not just similar, exact. Same timing, same pitch, same little rasp I get when my throat's dry. "Help us?" My own voice begged through the speakers. "We're still here. We're still." The word cut off in a burst of shrieking noise. I slapped the radio off. The sound kept going for half a second with no power before fading. I drove the next 10 miles with my jaw clenched, fingers locked on the wheel. Every substation tower I passed seemed to bend slightly, the lines humming louder than they should. The trailer was a live thing behind me, humming and buzzing and clicking in fits. The last stretch to the warehouse felt like rolling through a minefield of invisible currents. When I finally backed into the receiver's dock, dawn was just starting to smudge the horizon with gray. I killed the engine and sat for a second, palms slick with sweat. The warehouse guys popped the dock seal and rolled the door up. I watched in the mirror as they opened my trailer doors from the inside, light spilling into the box. Workers with pallet jacks went in, fluorescent vests reflecting. A shout cut across the noise. "Hey, what the?" I jumped out of the cab and headed for the dock door before anyone could tell me to wait. Inside, 2 workers stood several feet back from one of the pallets. The plastic wrap had been cut away, boxes exposed. A big flat-screen TV sat on the top layer, screen facing outward. It was on. Nobody had plugged it in. The screen didn't show a logo or a menu. It showed static, white and black fuzz jittering. But in the shifting snow, shapes flickered. A curve of asphalt, a flash of headlights, the silhouette of a driver's face, mouth open, eyes wide. For a heartbeat, I recognized the angle. It was the view from my windshield. "How's it doing that?" one of the workers whispered. Another TV, farther down the row, blinked on. Its screen showed a different scene. A long tunnel of fire, sparks arcing along racks of equipment. Smoke poured along the ceiling. Dim figures moved between rows of machines, some running, some crawling. The warehouse supervisor swore and waved his arms. "Kill the power. Kill the power to this bay. Right now." Someone hit a big red button near the door. The overhead lights went out with a heavy thunk. The hum of the conveyor belts died. Forklift backup beepers went silent. The TVs kept glowing. Not bright, but enough that in the dark, their screens lit up, faces turned toward them. Scenes kept rolling. A blacked-out room with emergency strobes. A hallway full of thick smoke. A server rack, doors hanging open, cables melting. Then the images turned to roads. Highways at night, shot from truck heights. Some I recognized, overpasses, mile markers. Others were dead flat 2 lanes in the middle of nowhere. In every shot there were trucks, some jackknifed, wrecked, some rolling. In one, a rig burned, flames pouring out of the trailer like a torch. On one screen, for just a second, I saw my own cab interior. My hands on the wheel, my face in shadow. My lips moved, like I was saying something. Then every screen flashed white. The glow died, one by one, like candles being snuffed. The air smelled like hot electronics and something faintly burned. The power came back up a moment later. The TVs stayed off. They pulled me into an office and grilled me again. Had I stopped? Had anyone accessed the trailer? Had there been any issues with the load? I told them about the interference, the static, the way my equipment went crazy near the substation. I didn't mention the whispers in my own voice. Some things I knew would only get me labeled as tired or unstable. A few days later, over coffee in another warehouse, a guy from the receiving side told me what he'd heard. "You know that batch you brought?" he said. "Half of it's being sent back. Some isn't even going on the market." "Why?" I asked. He leaned in a little. "Those units were built using reclaimed components. Boards, chips, whatever they could salvage from a data center that caught fire. Place went up fast. Couple of techs didn't make it out. They say the drives kept spinning even while the room was burning. Nobody was supposed to reuse that stuff, but somebody did. Cheaper than making new." I stared into my coffee, watching ripples form with every tiny tremor of my hand. He continued, "People say information has a kind of inertia. Data doesn't like to die. It just gets moved, copied, rehoused." He shrugged. "Who knows what kind of junk clung to those boards? I still haul electronics. It's what I'm good at. But now, when the radio slips into something that doesn't sound like any normal station, I turn it off immediately. When the GPS hiccups, I don't stare at it too long. And when I pass big substations at night, I keep my eyes straight ahead and my hands steady on the wheel. Because now I know the devices in the box behind me aren't always blank slates. Sometimes they're full of ghosts, of burned-out racks, unfinished sentences, desperate calls for help that never made it to human ears. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to be the one dragging them through the dark, they'll use your truck as a moving antenna to scream a little bit more into the world before they finally go quiet. I'm Luis, a regional night driver who lives by his logbook, and the only thing that didn't add up that night was the weight in my trailer, and whatever was hiding inside it. I'm not one of those cowboys who runs by feel alone. I watch my hours, I watch my fuel, and I pay attention to weight like it's a second religion. I run the same midnight lane between 2 distribution centers 4, sometimes 5 nights a week. Groceries, dry freight mostly. It's boring, predictable work. That's why I like it. That night showed me how fast predictable can turn into something you never want to see again. It started at the outbound DC just before midnight. Fluorescent lights humming, forklifts buzzing around like angry bees, the smell of cardboard and stale coffee hanging in the air. I checked in at the shipping office, picked up my paperwork, and scanned the manifest like I always do. 38,000 pounds of assorted boxed food. Nothing special. Cereal, canned goods, dry pasta. Full trailer, standard lane, straight shot to the inbound DC 300 miles away. Dock 12, trailer 618, the clerk said, barely glancing up. I'd seen him 100 times. He never smiled, but he never screwed up either. That should have made me feel better. I backed under 618, felt the kingpin lock, hooked my airlines, did my walk around. Door seal was fresh, number matched the manifest. Everything looked fine. When I tug tested and pulled away from the dock, though my first thought was, this feels light. Not just they shorted a pallet light. I mean empty-ish. A loaded trailer has a certain way of talking to you through the frame. You feel the drag when you let out the clutch, the slight squat in the suspension, the way it leans into a turn. This one rolled like I'd hooked an empty, even though the paperwork said 38,000. I pulled up to the yard scale out of habit. The numbers flashed lower than they should have, but yard scales can be finicky. I told myself I'd get the real reading at the first state scale down the highway and rolled out of the lot. The night was clear and cool, with that dry chill that creeps in after midnight. Highway was quiet, just a few scattered headlights in the distance and the soft glow of towns sliding by now and then. My truck climbed the early grades too easily, engine barely working. On the first long downhill, I feathered the brakes and felt the rig slow quicker than it should have. Everything about it whispered, this is an empty trailer. But it wasn't. On paper, I was hauling 19 tons of food. About 40 miles out, the first way station sign showed up. Open, all trucks must enter. I sighed, flipped on my blinker, and followed the line of reflective signs into the station. I rolled onto the scale, watching the big digital readout off to the side. The numbers jumped, paused, then settled. 42,000. Total. Truck, trailer, everything. I frowned. My tractor alone with fuel and me in it runs a little over 30. That meant, according to the scale, my trailer had maybe 12,000 in it. A third of what the manifest said. The speaker crackled. You're a little light there, driver. I leaned out the window, got a full load of groceries on. 38 in the box, according to my paperwork. The officer stepped out of his booth with a clipboard, walked over, and gave the side of my trailer a couple of knocks like he could hear the truth in there. Our scale's been acting up, he admitted. You feel loaded? Honestly, I said. Feels like they shorted me, but the manifest says full. He looked at the paper, then at the trailer again, then shrugged. We'll have someone look at the equipment. You're good to go. Just don't go tossing that thing around like it's empty in case it's us and not them. I nodded, rolled off, but the whole thing scratched at me. Numbers don't lie. When they do, I don't like it. Back on the interstate, the truck kept acting wrong. On one stretch of rolling hills, I watched my fuel mileage jump in a way that made no sense. I've run that segment enough to know what I get with a full load. That night, the numbers on my dash climbed higher than I'd ever seen them, like I was bobtailing or carrying air. The engine barely grunted on the upgrades. I didn't have to drop a gear where I usually do. I got this weird floaty feeling, like the trailer wasn't really there. I kept checking my mirrors to make sure it hadn't magically disconnected. Then, without warning, the opposite happened. On a long, gentle climb, the truck suddenly started dragging. My RPMs dropped as if someone had thrown an anchor behind me. I kicked out of cruise and gave it more throttle. It felt like I just picked up an extra 20,000 pounds in the span of a quarter mile. The steering got heavier. The rig leaned into the grade like it was fighting something. What the hell? I muttered, downshifting. Then, a few minutes later, the heaviness went away. Just lifted. The truck surged forward like someone had released the brakes on the trailer. My fuel numbers jumped back up. It didn't make physical sense. Loads don't appear and disappear like that. I checked my mirrors again. Same white box, same marker lights glowing. No smoke, no dragging brakes, nothing obvious. The second scale showed up about 90 miles from my destination. Another big green sign, way station open. I almost kept rolling, but habit and paranoia made me signal in. This time, as I pulled onto the platform, the truck already felt heavy again. There wasn't a steep grade leading up to it, no sudden weather change, nothing that should have changed the weight. But I could feel it in my clutch leg, in the way the suspension creaked as I settled on the pads. The numbers climbed on the digital readout. 82, 85, 89. They stopped just short of 96. I stared at it, throat dry. That would put the trailer alone at over 65,000 pounds. Flat out impossible for a standard grocery load, totally illegal, and a mechanical nightmare. The speaker snapped. Driver, set brake and remain in cab. Here we go, I thought. The officer this time wasn't half asleep. He came out with his hat pulled low and a tight jaw, tablet in hand. You got paperwork on this? He demanded. I handed him my manifest through the window. He didn't bother being polite about taking it. His eyes flicked down the numbers, then back up at me. This says 38, he said. Yes, sir. You know what our scale says? I nodded toward the readout. I can see it. He narrowed his eyes. You running double-stacked pallets of lead back there? Or are you padding manifests for extra cash? My stomach twisted. I picked up at the DC like always. Trailer was loaded and sealed when I got it. I haven't opened it. We're gonna have to look at that, he said. Pop the seal. Now. I can't break it without authorization, I said automatically. The policy drilled into me. It's their freight. He jerked his thumb toward the readout. You're almost 16,000 over gross. You're not legal. That's all the authorization I need. Move it to Bay 2. We'll do a reweigh first, then figure it out. I did as I was told, heart banging against my ribs. When I pulled onto the second scale pad, my palms were slick on the wheel. I watched the numbers climb again. This time they stopped at 80. On the nose. Exactly what my paperwork said I should be. The officer stared at the display, then at his tablet, then back at the display. He made me roll off, then back on. Same result. 80 every time. Equipment trouble tonight, he said finally, but his tone wasn't convinced. We're taking that pad offline. You're legal by the second way. I can't write you for what the machine doesn't want to hold. What about the first reading? I asked. He gave me a hard look. You didn't see a first reading. You saw a glitch. Get out of here before it changes its mind. I took the out and rolled, but the hairs on my arms stayed standing. By then, I was rattled enough that I decided to stop and check the trailer myself. Seal or no seal. There was a small rest area about 10 miles up, the kind no one uses at night except other truckers desperate for a bathroom and a smoke. I pulled in, choosing a spot under a busted light that flickered but at least made a half-hearted attempt at doing its job. The air outside had gone strangely still. No wind, no insects chirping from the trees. Just my engine ticking as it cooled, and under that, a low creak from the trailer suspension. I walked back with my flashlight. The seal stared back at me, yellow plastic innocently stamped with the DC's logo. I checked the number again, like it might magically change. Didn't. Sorry, guys. I muttered to no one, pulled my pocket knife, and sliced the seal. The click was soft. My pulse wasn't. I swung one door open, then the other. The smell hit me first. Cardboard, a little dust, nothing rotten, nothing chemical. Just boring, dry, frayed air. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw rows of brown boxes stacked neatly from nose to tail. Generic corrugated cartons, all the same size, stretch-wrapped into tidy pallet cubes. No logos, no brand names, no product art. Just blank boxes with small printed codes I didn't recognize. I stepped up into the trailer. The floor felt solid under my boots. I picked a box off the corner of the closest pallet, set it down, and slit the tape. The flaps folded back with a papery whisper. Empty. Just clean cardboard, no packing material, nothing. An empty box pretending to be full. I grabbed another farther in. Opened it. Empty. I moved down the row, cutting into random samples. Every single one was the same. Perfectly formed, perfectly sealed, and completely empty. Cold slid down my spine. On the manifest, each box had a weight assigned. On the scales, sometimes those weights seemed to exist, sometimes they didn't. But right then, in that moment, I was standing in a trailer of nothing. Except that wasn't true either, because as I stood there, crouched over an open box, I felt it. Pressure. Not on my skin, on my awareness. Like standing on a subway platform and suddenly realizing the crowd has closed in around you. That sense of bodies at your back, shoulders brushing shoulders, the heat and presence of people packed in tight. Except the air in that trailer was cool and empty. My flashlight beam trembled as I slowly turned. There was nothing there. Just row after row of identical pallets. Blank boxes stacked up to the ceiling. But my brain kept insisting there were shapes between them. The feeling of someone standing just out of my periphery. Dozens of them, maybe more. Breathing without sound. Okay, I whispered. Okay, enough. I backed out carefully, like I was trying not to bump into anyone. Stepped down onto the pavement and shut the doors. My hands shook as I looped a spare lock through the hasp. Felt ridiculous, locking in nothing. It also felt necessary. Back in the cab, I fired up the engine. My e-log tablet flickered to life on the dash. For a second, My current trip screen flashed away and a different route map appeared, one I'd never driven. A series of gray lines, tiny towns and states I hadn't been to in years. The mileage counter at the bottom ticked numbers I'd never logged. Then it blinked and jumped back to my lane, but now it showed I'd already been driving for 17 hours straight. I stared at it. My hours were clean. I started my shift less than 5 hours ago. The tablet blinked again. 13 hours. 8. Then it reset to the correct number like nothing had happened. Driving with a malfunctioning log is a good way to have your day ruined at the next checkpoint, so I rebooted the thing. As it restarted, I caught glimpses of old entries flashing by, routes I recognized from years back, plus some I didn't, all overlaid on top of each other like the system was remembering every trip I'd ever run, and a few I hadn't. Out on the highway again, the truck started that weird weight dance once more. Hills that should have dragged me down passed under my wheels like nothing. Then, for a stretch, it felt like I was towing a concrete building. In my mirrors, I caught brief, unsettling illusions. The trailer suspension dipping and rising in gentle waves, as if a crowd inside was shifting its weight from side to side. At one point, in the amber glow of a sodium vapor light near an overpass, I could have sworn I saw the trailer skin swell outward slightly, then relax, like a lung taking a breath. Logic kept trying to pull me back. Bad data, faulty sensors, imagination, but the skin on the back of my neck wouldn't listen. About 20 miles from the inbound DC, I saw flashing lights up ahead. Patrol cars and a DOT truck were pulled sideways across an on-ramp, herding commercial traffic onto the shoulder. Random safety check. One of the officers said when I rolled to a stop, "We've had reports of overweight rigs coming through. We're running portables." Of course they were. They had me pull onto a flat, marked-off rectangle on the shoulder, portable scales laid out like big tiles under my tires. I held my breath as they took the readings, watching the guy with the handheld display frown, then double-check. He walked up to my window. "You're at 79.8, he said. "Your paperwork says 80. Close enough for government work. You're good. Just like the manifest?" I asked. He nodded. "Right on the money. Mind if I ask?" I hesitated. "How often do you see spreads like we did tonight? Big swings? False heavies? False lights?" He thought about it. "Scales glitch, but not usually on portables and fixed in the same night." He peered at my trailer, then shrugged. "You look legit, though. Deliver your groceries and get some sleep." I drove the last stretch in a kind of fog, not from fatigue, but from that tight, buzzing feeling you get when your brain can't reconcile what it just lived through. At the inbound DC, they put me on a door right away. I watched in my mirror as they cracked the lock, opened the trailer, and rolled the first pallet jack inside. Took them longer than usual to unload. I saw people going in and out more than the normal two-man team. When they finally finished, the receiving clerk called me into the office. He sat behind his monitor, lips pressed tight. My manifest was on the desk between us. "You run this lane often, Luis?" he asked. "For nights a week," I said. "Same time, same DCs." He nodded, tapped the paper. "Manifest says 38,000 of mixed box dry goods. According to our guys, you brought in something else." My chest went cold. What did they find? He picked up a sheet and scanned it. Some of the boxes were filled like they were supposed to be. Food items. But most of it was wrong. Expired product, some of it from brands we don't even carry anymore. Half of one pallet was full of old canned goods with labels we haven't seen in a decade. Another had nothing but empty boxes, taped up good as new. He flipped the page. Then it gets weird. They found boxes packed with personal junk. Family photos, kids' drawings, a couple of old jackets, someone's Bible with a name written in it. Stuff you'd see in the back of a U-Haul, not a grocery load. My mouth felt dry. "You think somebody slipped their own crap on with the freight?" He shook his head. "Dates on some of the food were too old. Names on the mail we found. Addresses don't exist anymore. One guy found a photo of this very warehouse with the old logo we changed 5 years ago. None of it matches what the system says we shipped." He looked up at me, really looked. "What did you feel like you were hauling tonight, Luis?" I met his eyes and thought about lying. Instead, I said, sometimes it felt like nothing. Sometimes it felt like too much. Like the weight didn't know what it wanted to be. He studied me for a second, then signed the receiving report. We'll deal with it on our end. You're free to go. I walked back out into the yard with my head buzzing. I didn't quit trucking. It's all I know. But I quit that route. When dispatch tried to put me on it again, I told them to give it to someone else. I made up an excuse about wanting more variety, different hours. The truth is, I didn't want to be the one carrying whatever the hell that was back and forth between 2 points like some kind of midnight conveyor for lost weight. Because the way I see it now, not every load is just product. Some trailers carry more than freight and pallets. They carry leftovers of routes that went bad, of families that never made it to new homes, of shipments that got lost in the system and never truly arrived. That night, I think I hauled the weight of all of that. The remembered mass of other people's journeys, flickering in and out of existence around me, trying to decide whether it still belonged to this world. And I am never, ever getting between a ghost and where it thinks it's supposed to be again. I'm Rick, a certified hazmat tanker driver, and the night a simple detour rerouted my load turned my rig into a rolling nightmare. I've been pulling tanks long enough to know most people are scared of the wrong stuff. They see hazmat on the placard and picture Hollywood explosions, mushroom clouds, fireballs. Truth is, it's usually the invisible things that get you. Fumes, vapors, slow leaks you don't smell until you're already breathing wrong. That's why I liked my rules simple. Follow the approved route, avoid back roads, no cute shortcuts. You treat the load with respect and you get home. This particular run started at a refinery I knew too well. Place was a small city of pipes and steam when the sun was up and a burning steel forest at night. I checked in at the gate a little before midnight. Sodium lights lit everything the color of old bone. The flare stacks painted the low clouds orange. The product that night was an industrial solvent. Non-explosive, supposedly. The kind used to strip God knows what off parts before some other process started. I'd hauled variations of it a dozen times. The manifest listed it under a long chemical name I couldn't pronounce. What bothered me wasn't the print. It was the handwriting. At the bottom of the paperwork, under the typed hazard descriptions, someone had scribbled in shaky letters, "Fume caution, use extreme ventilation." It wasn't part of the standard warnings. I'd seen the sheet often enough to know. I held it up to the loading clerk at the bay. "What's this about fumes?" I asked. He barely looked at it. "Legal being dramatic," he said. "Same stuff as last time. You're good. Keep your windows up. Vents on recirc. You know the drill." I watched the guys on the gantry connect the loading arm to the top of my tanker. Pumps thudded. The metal under my boots vibrated as they filled the barrel. Off to the side, a couple of workers in respirators checked gauges. Masks fogged with their own breath. They looked like something out of a different kind of movie. When the loading was done, I climbed up and checked the domes myself. Seals looked good. Hatches locked. No visible mist or vapor. The night air was cool and smelled like every refinery night. Burned gas, oil, a hint of something sharp. Inside the office, the dispatcher on duty signed off on my route sheet. "Straight shot, Rick," he said. "Interstate all the way until you cut south at mile 210. No stops except your mandated breaks, and don't take them anywhere near towns. You know the protocol." "I know it," I said. "No detours, no scenic routes." He smirked. "It's midnight. Scenic is closed anyway." I rolled out of the plant with the lights of the stacks fading in my mirror, my tanker humming behind me, full and heavy. The placards on the sides and back shouted the hazmat code in big black numbers. I always feel more exposed with those on. It's like driving with a sign saying, "Hit me and everyone suffers." The first hour was uneventful. I settled into the rhythm. Engine at a comfortable rumble, trailer steady, gauges in the green. Radio low, windows up, vents closed to outside air. I could still catch faint whiffs of refinery stink on my clothes, but nothing out of the ordinary. Traffic was light. Couple of other trucks, some late commuters, the occasional set of headlights sliding by. The sky was a deep, clean black with no moon, just a handful of stars fighting with light pollution. Then the GPS chimed. The screen flashed, the little route line ahead of me turning from blue to gray. "Accident reported ahead," it said in that bland synthetic voice. "Rerouting you to save 12 minutes. The new route line swung me off the interstate in about 15 miles, down onto an older two-lane that paralleled the main highway through a string of small towns I didn't recognize. I frowned at the map. That road was narrower, twistier. It cut closer to some residential streets. Exactly the kind of path we were supposed to avoid with this kind of load. I reached for my phone on its dash mount. A new text sat at the top of the screen from dispatch. "Accident ahead MM 134 to 136. Detour approved. Follow GPS reroute, acknowledge." I tapped to call them instead. Dispatch answered on the second ring. "Night desk. It's Rick," I said. "GPS is writing a detour for me onto some two-lane. You guys really want me off the interstate with this tank?" "Stand by," the voice said. Muffled clicking followed. "Yeah, we pushed a detour notice," he said after a moment. "Pile up there, hazmat team on scene, states closing the lanes. You'll be fine on the old highway. It's officially sanctioned." "That route goes near houses," I said. "DOT signed off," he replied, sounding bored. "We forwarded you the approval. You'll see less traffic, actually. Safer." It didn't sit right in my gut, but I'd heard of reroutes before. Storms, wrecks, construction. Hazmat didn't mean invincible. It meant controlled. "All right," I said finally. "But if something goes sideways, I'm writing your name in my report." He chuckled. "I'll frame it." 15 miles later, I took the exit like the GPS told me to. The ramp dropped me down onto a two-lane with cracked asphalt and faded center lines. The interstate lights fell away behind me, replaced by occasional yellow glow from tired street lamps in small clusters. The first few miles of that old highway were quiet enough. Houses spaced every quarter mile, most dark, a porch light here and there, rusted mailboxes, sagging fences, a couple of shuttered gas stations. The tanker rolled smooth. No strange noises, no sway. I told myself I was overreacting. Then I smelled it. Faint at first. A metallic tang that didn't match the usual diesel and asphalt. It was like the inside of a paint can. The air in a shop where someone's been cleaning parts with solvent all day. Not strong, but persistent. I checked the HVAC settings. Recirculate on. Windows sealed. I shouldn't have been smelling anything from the outside or from the barrel. I cracked the driver's side window for a second and sniffed. The night air outside smelled mostly like damp grass and cold dirt. When I closed it again, the metallic scent crept back in. It was subtler than a leak should have been, like something that had filtered through layers. My tongue started to feel coated, like I'd licked a battery. I pulled into a wide gravel pull-off near a closed diner, put my flashers on, and climbed down. The air outside felt cooler and cleaner. The smell was almost gone the second I stepped out. I walked the length of the tanker with my flashlight, beam crawling over valves, hose connections, the undercarriage. I checked the manway covers, the outlet ports, the relief valves. No visible drip, no mist, no sheen on the metal. The barrel was warm under my hand, but not hot. I knelt near the main outlet and sniffed. Nothing but the ghost of whatever had been on this road 100,000 tires ago. When I climbed back into the cab and closed the door, the metallic odor slid back into my throat like it had been waiting. Not stronger, just there. Insistent. CO2 monitors clean, I told myself, glancing at the little device clipped to the dash. Numbers were normal. No alarms. "You're fine." I pulled back onto the road. The fog rolled in slowly at first, like breath on a cold mirror. It began as wisps along the ditch, little tendrils of white that curled around fence posts and telephone poles. Then it thickened, creeping up over the asphalt until my low beams were cutting through a gray wall 10, maybe 15 feet ahead. Streetlights turned into soft halos. Reflective signs smeared into glowing blobs before I was on top of them. The lane markers, already faded, disappeared altogether. I slowed down, hazard lights on, every nerve alert. Fog was bad with any load, but with a hazardous tank behind me, I felt every second of it in my spine. That's when I started seeing them. The first figure appeared on my right, just beyond the edge of my beams. A shape, roughly human height, wearing what looked like a hard hat and a vest. He stood perfectly still beside the road, hands at his sides, face turned toward the truck. I thought it was a road worker at first, some poor guy stuck on night duty. I lifted my foot, ready to brake if he stepped closer. He didn't move. His vest stripes barely glowed. The fog wrapped around him, hiding his features. As I passed, I turned my head to look directly through the side window. He wasn't there. Just empty shoulder, grass, and fog. Okay, I muttered. Refinery fumes and long nights. That's all this is. A mile later, there was another one. This one on the left side, near a collapsed fence and an overgrown ditch. Same vague silhouette, work clothes, maybe safety gear, arms hanging. Watching, I fought the urge to stare. Eyes forward, hands steady. When I checked the mirror a second after passing, the shoulder behind me was empty again. No figure, no footprints in the damp dirt. My eyes started to sting. Not crying, irritation. Gritty, like I'd been swimming in chlorinated water. My head felt tight, like a band around my temples. I checked the CO2 monitor again. Normal. The radio clicked on without me touching it. No music station this time. No DJ. A monotone voice read out something about hazardous release. The words slightly garbled by static. Sections of Highway 47 and the surrounding access roads are now closed, the voice said. Residents are being asked to shelter in place as emergency crews respond to a chemical spill involving tanker designation. The name of the chemical matched what was on my manifest. Fumes are reported to cause disorientation and hallucinations, the voice went on. Multiple first responders have collapsed. Drivers are being warned to avoid the area. My hand shot out and slapped the power off. The radio went silent. The CO2 monitor beeped once like it was annoyed with me, then settled down. I glanced at the GPS. My little icon scooted along a representation of the road I was on. According to the map, I was still miles from any intersection with Highway 47. According to the broadcast, though, that area was already full of my product, spilled and killing people. My mouth tasted like copper. The figures by the roadside kept appearing. Sometimes alone, sometimes in twos or threes. Some wore what looked like turnout gear, the silhouettes of helmets and bulky jackets. Others looked like regular people in jeans and jackets. All of them stood perfectly still. No waving, no motion, no interest in flagging me down. Just watching. Every time I tried to watch one in my mirrors after I passed, the fog behind me showed only the red pulse of my taillights and empty shoulder. The tanker began to pull in ways I didn't like. Normally, you can feel the liquid inside respond to turns and stops. A soft lagging weight, a sway that you're trained to anticipate. This was different. The slosh was too strong on shallow curves and not strong enough on sharper ones. Sometimes I'd feel a surge right as the road straightened, like the whole contents had slumped in the wrong direction and needed to correct. The steering wheel tugged. There were moments when it felt like I was turning into a curve before I even saw it. My hands moved by something other than the lines on the road. I took another look at the GPS. The blue line ahead now showed bends that the road in front of me didn't seem to match. According to the screen, I should have been climbing a long, gentle rise. In reality, my headlights revealed a nearly flat stretch with just the slightest dip. The odometer showed miles ticking by, but the town names on the map stayed the same. A text buzzed onto my phone. Fog expected, continue detour. Do not stop, vehicles responding ahead, it said. The sender ID was dispatch. My gut rolled. I hit call again. Dispatch picked up after a long ring this time. I recognized the same voice as before. Night desk. It's Rick again, I said. Where exactly is this accident you keep detouring me around? Still up there, he said. You're making good time. Just keep following the GPS, don't stop. You'll clear the zone before you know it. My gaze flicked to the fog beyond the windshield. You sure I haven't already reached it? According to your unit ping, you're not even close, he said. Fingers clicked on his end. You okay, Rick? Your biometric flag just went up. Heart rate a little high. I hadn't signed up for any biometrics. My truck didn't have that installed. I'm done with this detour, I said. I'm finding a way back to the interstate. That's not approved, he replied, steel edging into his tone. You need to stay on the designated route, then send a cop to arrest me. I snapped and hung up. The next intersection that offered a turn wide enough for a tanker, I took it. The GPS protested, recalculating in a frantic loop, trying to send me back to the same old highway. I ignored it, navigating by a sense of direction I'd built over years of zigzagging through states. The fog got thicker for a minute, like something angry I was leaving. My headlights bounced off a solid wall of white. The road under my tires narrowed. The edge lines vanished completely. I gripped the wheel, eyes burning, tongue heavy in my mouth. For a second, I had the sickening sensation that the tanker behind me wasn't following the tractor, that it was swinging off at an angle trying to drag me down some invisible ramp. I kept my speed low, 10 miles an hour, then 8, hazard flashers pulsing in the mist. Then, gradually, the air started to thin. White milk turned to gray wisps. I began to see the faint hints of lane markings again. A streetlight appeared ahead, sharp instead of smeared. I rolled under it like a submarine surfacing. A minute later, the green glow of the interstate signs rose up ahead. I took the ramp with almost painful relief, the curve familiar, the merge lane long and straight. As soon as I settled onto the main highway, an odd silence dropped over the cab. The radio stayed dead. The GPS eased back into normal, the route line straight, the little truck icon where it should be. The CO2 monitor gave a single friendly chirp and then sat quietly. My eyes stopped burning. My tongue lost its metallic edge. Behind me, the tanker rode like it always did, heavy, liquid, predictable. I finished the run on the interstate, following the original route sheet step by step. The receiver signed for the load without incident. No leaks, no pressure issues, no complaints about arrival time. If I hadn't had sweat dried into my shirt and a headache pounding behind my eyes, it could have been any other night. Back at the refinery a couple days later, I went to the dispatch office and dropped my report on the desk. I'd written it all down. The detour, the smells, the fog, the figures, the weird broadcast, the whole ugly thing. The day dispatcher, a different guy, read through it, frowning deeper with each page. We never authorized a detour that night, he said. You texted me, I replied. Said DOT approved it. Told me to follow GPS. He shook his head. We log every route change. There's nothing here. He turned his monitor toward me, showing a screen with a simple line. Tracker shows you stayed on the interstate the whole time. No deviation recorded. That's impossible, I said. I was on that back road for at least an hour. He scrolled. Unit ping stayed tied to the main route. No dropouts, no reroutes. You may be dreaming while you drove. Rick? I didn't answer. There's no point arguing with a computer record. It always wins. He handed my report back. You want to file this as an incident, that's your right. But just know it's going to raise eyebrows. You've got a clean record. I'd hate to see someone start talking about fitness for duty because you saw ghosts in the fog or whatever. I left without filing it formally. Years later, I was at home between runs, flipping channels in a motel room that smelled like bleach and stale carpet. A local news segment caught my eye. Grainy footage of wreckage on an old 2-lane highway, hazmat crews moving through thick white fog, their suits silhouetted in flashing lights. A tanker lay on its side in the ditch, its barrel torn open like a split can. Placards on the crumpled metal showed the same hazmat code as my solvent load from that night. The reporter's voice shook as she said the words. Officials confirm multiple fatalities, including first responders who were overcome by fumes. The accident occurred along the decommissioned Highway 47 corridor, where traffic had been rerouted in error. They cut to a still photo of the tanker upright at a previous point in its life. Different company logo, different paint job. The date in the corner of the live footage played over and over in my head. Month, day, year. They matched the timestamp burned into my memory from that night. The one-eyed checked on the dash while listening to a future emergency broadcast about a spill that hadn't happened yet. Except apparently it had. Just not to me. I shut the TV off and sat there in the half-dark, listening to the hum of the motel fridge and the buzz of the neon sign outside. In my mind, I saw that old Tulane again, covered in fog, lined with silent figures in vests and helmets that disappeared when I passed. I still haul hazmat. That's what I'm trained for. But I don't trust detours anymore, no matter who approves them. If a GPS tries to take me down some forgotten road in the middle of the night, I stay on the main line or I park until daylight. Because there are routes out there that don't just take you through space. They drag you past something else. Past the echo of wrecks that already happened, or haven't yet. Past accidents waiting for the right truck, the right driver, the right night. And I am certain of one thing: whatever was in that fog wanted my rig to be part of that story, not just a guy years later watching it on the news.